We're going to reconvene in open session at 7:35. In accordance with the open meeting law, the board states for the record that this meeting is being recorded by NORCAM and may be recorded by other local media. If we could all rise and raise the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we are going to begin with board member reports. Mr. O'Leary, would you like to start? We're going to do old and new together.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm going to deal with it. I just, since our last meeting, the Board of Health had a meeting with the Recycling Committee, and again, you'll get a little later report. We'll go over the warrant articles, but extremely productive. And Mr. Greenberg and Mr. Rogers from the Recycling Committee, with the Board of Health agent, and lots of good discussion. Board of Health basically is endorsing the concept and idea of moving forward with it, but would like to work with them in tandem with presenting an article at the next June town meeting, and in the meantime, engaging the public in between, and very productive. And congratulate Mr. Greenberg and the Board of Health for being so receptive to one another, and looking forward to working together to bring this to fruition. And we'll have to endorse the concept, the idea, and the necessity to address the issue. So very productive, and I think what you're going to hear, Mr. Greenberg is here, will report on the warrant article, how they wish to move forward. In addition to that, Board of Health's very busy with some clinics, and they have a vision clinic, I guess, coming up this month. So, yes. Yeah, which is mostly for employees and staff, and may be expanded to the public, depending upon the receptivity, how many people participate. It's going to be Saturday, excuse me, it's going to be the 28th of September, Thursday. Then in addition to that, they're going to be having their North Reading Community Health Fair, October 21st, from 11 to 3 at the high school, which is a Saturday. And they're going to have a whole host of programming there for all ages, up and down. They're going to be having raffle giveaways, mountain bike, things of that nature. People will bring the tickets from the food pantry, will automatically get a ticket to win a mountain bike. But you'll be hearing a lot more about this for the next few weeks as they roll it out. But it's going to be a big undertaking, and we're hoping that the public takes full advantage of it. So it's going to be some free screening, everything from cholesterol, blood sugar level, body mass index, all the stuff that we don't want to know. They're going to be offering all these services. And all these things that I should be taking advantage of, I'm probably too embarrassed to do so. But again, for the rest of the public, they should. Again, they'll be doing influenza shots, COVID shots, RSV shots, all available at the same time. So it's going to be pretty exciting, a big undertaking. There's going to be a significant amount of time planning this out, and it's coming together very nicely. And as I said, we'll be hearing more about it, and hopefully they talk about it a little bit more at town meeting too, so there'll be more of a captive audience to get the word out. So that's going to be from 11 to 3 at the high school, and it will be inside, just because it's available, and who knows what the weather's going to be.
Right.
But they're going to have all sorts of concessions in there, and all sorts of programs. Something to look forward to.
And that's on the Saturday?
That's on a Saturday.
Saturday, October 21st.
Yep, October 21st. Let's see what else. Recycling, not the liaison, but very exciting stuff, and you'll hear about it later on. Other than that, nothing else to report. Hillview, put up the bid on improvements to the course, waiting to get the bids back, and again, putting our piece out shortly. It's in the town administrator's hands right now for the golf management contract and golf carts. So they're very busy too. Everybody's busy. And everybody's working hard for the community, and pretty much everybody's a volunteer. So congratulations to all of them, and we appreciate their efforts.
Thank
That's
you.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wallner.
Yep, Forest Committee, we had our first meeting with the consultant, and we had representatives from the school committee, from Conservation Committee, Conservation Commission, excuse me, and some town people. So we got through that. The main goal is to figure out the mapping, who owns what, and we were going to do a site walk today. Because of the rain, we didn't do that, so it's going to be next Tuesday. They'll be doing that site walk. So that's in process. Again, the goal of that is to memorialize what we have and to also make it more accessible for the town to be able to use, and to actually get rid of some of the quads and motorcycles that are digging up the trails, and make it to some capacity more available for disabled people as well. And then on the tax committee, I think the board's been, we've been reading in the paper, and we've been getting some letters from the town about trying to do things to address tax issues for especially the fixed income senior population in our town, which is substantial. The tax committee is meeting for the first time on Wednesday. It's going to be a lot of new ideas to look at, and so I'm looking forward to getting started on that. And I'm looking at, by the time we're ready to do the split zoning and we're talking about tax rates, we're going to have some ideas on the table for us to consider as well. So that's kind of my goal, to make that happen. At Town Day yesterday, which was, I don't know who went to it, but it was a great turnout, really nice day for it as well. Commission on Disabilities had a table, and as did the Cultural Council. We got a little bit of attention. We gave out tattoos. That always gets everybody's attention. Squirrel tattoos were at the top of the list. I don't know why.
Where's yours?
Can't show you.
Please don't.
Anyways, it was good. It was good to have some people out, and I think that we were invited. The Commission on Disabilities was invited to the health fair, so we're going to probably be there for that as well. So that's it, and I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Studo.
We had the first the second, but the first in-person wastewater committee meeting this past Wednesday. It was fairly well attended, between some here and many more online. And so far, exactly what needed to happen has happened. That with the new members, we got some fresh questions for the consultants that I think will help further the conversation, as well as we, again, it's not a public hearing, so we're not going to be taking questions at those, but we stayed to try to answer a few questions after for the crowd, and also we kept a list of everybody who put questions in the chat, and we're going to try to answer them either over email or through the committee or someone. Also, one of the members, Mr. Jeff Griffin, had a great idea that we're going to do, where we're going to present, once we have more data, and then the closer we get to the final design, we're actually going to try to set a meeting individually with stakeholders individually, so people have more undivided attention, meaning one meeting for Edgewood, one meeting for Martin's Landing, just so it's not everyone and then no one gets a chance. And because I think one of the frustrating things is that people don't get a chance to speak. Some people have been to almost all our meetings, and I heard one person tell me once in an email, like, I went to 8 of them, I still haven't asked my question. And I'm like, well, that's not efficient. So that's something else. And I think we're going to get a lot more, going a lot quicker after town meeting, just because right now some of the resources we need in the form of DPW, finance, are all working towards town meeting. So I can't really say I need to commandeer all your time when that's only so. But it's so far so good. We haven't scheduled another one. Again, it's more of, there's some members that become a lot freer at the end of September, and then, like I said, some of the things we need in the committee to make it efficient, just we won't have that info for a couple of weeks. So, and other than that, that's it. I only talk about water all the time, and trash, but that hasn't come up yet.
Well, thank you, Mr. Studo. Mrs. Manu Pelli?
I know it's not interactive, but I had a question for Mr. Wallner on the Taxation Committee and a question for Mr. Studo on the wastewater.
Okay.
Because someone again mentioned yesterday at Town Day, the steps for the sewer project, including putting in sewer for Martin, the Martin Pond area. And that, I think we've addressed that, at least in our meetings. And is the wastewater committee going to address that information? That really isn't the scope of this project, and it keeps coming up as though that's like something we're hiding and we're going to end up doing it as part of this project. And someone asked me that, so.
Actually, it was addressed at the wastewater, and actually, it was addressed in the form of one, it's part of the FAQs where we straight out say that it's a hypothetical phase 2, and it's not, it's actually, it was brought up, and I mean, we pretty much, I mean, I don't know how, I put it to bed using every adjective I could think of, so.
But I think when you bring out and say it's a hypothetical, that leads people to the impression that as part of the design and planning, that we're including Martin's Pond, but we're just not telling people.
No, we are not.
So I do think we need to, I know we've said it, we've answered the questions in our meetings, and I think also there should be a portion, even if it's a small portion of the meeting after the committees explain things, where you can do a Q&A, like we're going to reserve the last 15 minutes of this
No, we did it
meeting.
after the meeting.
No, but people that are attending should hear that Q&A, because I think some of the same misinformation keeps coming up, and we might be partly responsible if we're saying it's a hypothetical. We should eliminate the continued idea that we're putting sewer in anywhere. First of all, the town has to say yes to it. We know this, but it's in design, so I think we need to really, with clarity, explain. And I said it many times yesterday at Town Day, because a lot of people are talking about this project in a really positive way. But that was something someone brought up.
We'll clarify even more that it is nowhere in the plan.
Yeah, right, because I think there could be, someone asked, are we putting sewer in the whole town?
Right, I know.
So
But that's the whole.
We'll clarify.
Exactly,
Yes.
Ms.
We'll
Gonzalez.
do our best to drive it
Yeah.
home, but I
Yes.
will just say that at the end of the day, just like those that say it's gonna cost you $100,000 betterment that doesn't even exist anymore, we can only say it so many times. I mean, but
Yeah.
we will do our best to try to, let's see if I can think of a way to get it more clarified. But thank you, yeah.
But even yesterday, I just wanted to ask to Mr. Wallner too, there was something in our packet which had multiple, multiple letters. It was obviously a boilerplate thing, so it really didn't have much of an impact. It was just a new name and someone signing. It actually looked like, as far as I could see, a lot of residents in your neck of the woods too that were on those. But I recall when we discussed this sort of a senior tax program, I think Mr. O'Leary's brought those suggestions up. I don't know how many years at this point, what can we do for seniors and things like that. But the tax type of a program, I think that was something you wanted to sit down with one specific individual that had written to all of us too.
Yeah, she's on the committee.
Yes, and we actually appointed her to the committee. And is that something that you're going to bring counsel on? Because it would seem to me that it would require some type of special act to change the way the law is.
Yeah.
So that would have to get vetted by the legislature and approved by the legislature, because it goes again, we can't change the law, right?
Right.
So are we able to have some of that guidance, I guess, from the lawyer too, in terms of what's possible and what isn't possible?
Right.
Because it's not a new thing that's been brought up.
Right.
Like I said, Mr. O'Leary's been mentioning this over and over again for as long as what relief can we can we
Right.
offer?
I mean, what I remember is every time they come in to explain what the tax rate's going to be for next year, they give us all the
Yes.
options that are available.
Yes.
So part of this will be for us to look at those again from the lens of, is there something we could be doing for seniors, especially those that are fixed income and are overhoused? Looking at that. But then also, the new committee member, Gail Manning, is coming in with some fresh ideas from other towns who have done things to look at those as well. So the goal is to have just really a brainstorming session of all the different variables we might have, and everybody come to the same understanding about what those are. And then with the reality of us, what might be something we could bring forward as an idea that we could do for next year or going forward at some point. So that's what I imagine for the first meeting to be, is just, what do the assessor's office know, and what are they going to tell us, and then what is Gail bringing to the party that is fresh things. And I have she's done a whole bunch of study that, it's reading through to find out what other towns have done. Other towns have done things to reach out to that demographic and have been successful in doing it. And, it'd be good to learn from them as well. So, but I mean, it would be new ideas that would be, big things to accomplish. There's no doubt in my mind that if we're talking any change to what we're currently doing, I think it's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of, probably legal analysis as well. That's my imagination. So thanks for saying that.
What are you on?
I think Mr. Studo has a question for Mr. Wallner, too.
Okay.
It's a hot topic,
All righty,
Ted.
so Mr. Studo,
Not
would
so
you like
much
to ask a question?
not so much a question, but just
Mr. Wallner.
just a thought, because I've had, and also Ms. Manning, I've had fun, but like I've had a few people ask. The one question is that I think an important thing is, especially assuming we would need public buy-in.
Sure.
I would come up with what the income number is sooner rather than later, because there's a lot of different opinion of what being on a fixed income and being enough is. I mean, I've talked to people that think, anything under 100,000 and you need help. But I know that you go to town meeting and start saying that, we need a tax break if you make 90, and that, I don't know. So that's, I think, just my suggestion, because it's very interesting, like, it's in the eye of the beholder, right? Of who thinks, depending on their lifestyle, of
Yeah.
what's considered a fixed income, right? Because it is different for people,
Yeah.
like, so.
I shouldn't just say fixed income. I just think of Social Security as
Yeah,
the baseline.
you know what I mean, yeah.
And the baseline of Social Security wouldn't possibly go over 40,000 at this point, right? So, and there are people that we're talking about probably in the 20s to 30s.
Yeah.
The most you can get out of Social Security right now is 40 if you just freshly retired.
So again, no,
So-
and that's just a comment there. I think the income thing should be a big
Yeah,
portion.
and I think actually, I think our town planner has a lot of details on demographics, what the household income is and things like that. I think we can get very specific pretty quickly. It's just what scheme is going to be the best one for trying to reach out to the audience we're trying to reach out to,
And like you said, Mr. Wallner, the assessor comes in and tells us every year about these programs. Mr. O'Leary mentions the circuit breaker
Yeah.
program, so we talk about it a lot, but maybe that committee can do the publication of it, which I think would be great.
Yeah.
But-
I'll just remind the board as well, at one point, maybe 8-10 years ago, my understanding on property taxes, there used to be a line there where you could contribute more to this fund. And people used to do that, but we stopped doing that. Now, it was small dollars and it was reaching out to the people who were in the most dire straits, but we stopped doing that. So there is an element of generosity in our town that really does want to see this happen. It's just, what's the level, where's the line, how's it going to work, and is it going to be effective? At the end of the day, we can do a little, but if a little is not going to solve the problems, then we haven't really solved the problem. So a lot to explore at this point.
Okay, and just a couple of quick,
Do you have any
just a
board
couple of,
reports?
yes.
Reports and new
Well,
business?
a couple of quick updates, but I do want to stick on Town Day because it was excellent.
Yeah.
It was very well attended too. I thought we were doing all the new business at the same time.
Yes.
We are.
All right. So I usually don't talk either, so.
You never do.
So,
So
but it was, I think, the most well-attended I've seen in a while there. And I did not see your booth, but I think I might have made my way halfway around and got stopped so many times that by the next 2 or 3 hours, I was just booked it out of there because we
You were
were,
with the pumps.
I was getting a
You were
sunburn,
like a celebrity
basically.
appearance?
No, I was just getting sunburnt, so, but they had a country music singer that was there, Annie Brobst, she was fabulous, and she sang, she took a break, Notorious sang, she went back, she was music all day, there was Alpha Omega had
Yeah.
other music going, it was so well done. The Historical and Antiquarian Society was there.
Oh, I didn't see them, yeah.
See, yeah, so,
It's a man in my
but
booth.
what I was thinking is, and I know it's a fundraising event, that booths pay $125, but there was a space for performers, but there were other spaces that it's our, we're hosting it, so those non-political ones should be able to set up a tent. I don't see why they can't, and just participate, because it was a great way to get the people that were there to know that
Yeah.
they're there, and they were publicizing the Apple Festival, and it was just it was excellent. So it was great attendance, not just by vendors, but by, families.
It was a beautiful day.
It was a beautiful sunny day, yes.
Not like today.
But it was excellent. And then the Master Facilities Planning had its other meeting, and they're kind of moving forward with their next steps. And I think Abby, Mrs. Hurlbut and Mrs. Hurlbut's here, so I think she knows, and then she was here at our last meeting about doing because we passed it over, or in the warrant. We didn't take it out, but we passed it over, but I had mentioned what we talked about perhaps doing a short, report of it for board member reports at the beginning of our town meeting. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I was sorry to miss Town Day. I had a personal family happy event, so I wasn't able to make it. So happy to hear that it was a great day. I attended the community impact team. We discussed the opioid funding from the lawsuits, one of them. And we invited the Housing Authority Director to the meeting for an hour, which I think is long overdue. I think it was a good thing to do. It's a state-run development, but it's very much part of the community. The people who live there go to the senior center, they interact in a lot of different things in town. Obviously, they live here. So to pull him in and kind of let him get to know, because he interacts with different people too. So I just thought it was an excellent recommendation by former Chief Murphy, and we made that happen. And as always, I tell everybody to go on to the Community Impact Team website, because there is always things going on. They do a really great job. Guiding Good Choices is starting October 4th, I think?
Every Wednesday in October.
Every Wednesday in October. And there's just so many other programs, and we have them here today in the audience. So go on there and see what's going on, check it out. Lots of things to get involved in. And then old and new business, I wanted to just survey my colleagues on this. So we are no longer required to have Zoom as part of our meeting. So I just wanted to kind of get an idea from my colleagues. It can be a choice. It can be like say we're having a public hearing, or we have an attorney or someone who needs to come on, and we need the Zoom, we can, but we don't have to have it every meeting if none of that is going on, or a member needs to be on the Zoom, we can have it, but we're not required to have it every meeting. So I kind of just wanted to get a feel from everyone how you would feel about, you know, we wouldn't have to have this set up. We would still have NORCAM. You know, we just wouldn't have the Zoom. So unless we wanted it or needed it, we would have an option. So I just wanted to feel, I guess I'll go through each one of you and get a feel for how you feel about it.
I think it's a great way for members of the community to join and listen in on the meeting. So I think we should keep the technology in place, perfect it. We sometimes have issues. You know, I joined you last meeting by Zoom. I could hear every one of you perfectly, but Mr. O'Leary, I could not for some reason. And his microphone
It's
was
like
right
my wife.
beside. No, it's so things like that, I mean, we could perfect it, but I really do think it's any way that we can make the meetings accessible to people, to be able to listen in, whatever they're doing. Maybe they're cooking their kids' dinner. Maybe their daughter's birthday is tonight, like mine is, and they're celebrating their daughter's birthday, you know, and they just want to put it on in the background or something like that. I don't know. But, you know, I think it's a great way for people to be able to access our meetings that might not necessarily be able to get here. And I think we should keep it in place. And I think we should decide we're the body, I think, that gets to determine if we actually keep the meetings in place, the availability for membership when the law reverts back to where it was in May. We still have the option to do it. We just have to make a vote, make a rule, et cetera, on it, make rules on it. I think we should keep it.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Studo, how do you feel?
I think we should, for what Ms. Menni-Pelli just said, the reasons. However, the only thing I would tweak is that I think in a public hearing setting, if you're participating via Zoom, you should type your question in. I think we don't have the technology where, you know, sometimes it doesn't come in clear. I feel like when we've had a public hearing where we had quite a few people participating via Zoom, there's a lot of, can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? And the next thing you know, it's like, you don't realize if it's more and more people talking, we just had an extra 40, 45 minutes. And because I think that is actually the number one complaint I get about how our meetings go too long and people can't participate the whole time. So it becomes like a vicious cycle of the technology not working. So I think we should definitely keep it open, but if you do choose to participate via Zoom, that unless you're there in a capacity as, you know, like a consultant or something where there's no choice, or a board member, I think you just have to accept the fact that you have to type in your question, that it's not going to be, you can still do your public comment, but just, I don't know if we can do it. I just feel that it does add a lot when you have to keep having someone repeat things. So.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Wallner?
Yeah, I think I'm with Kate. I think accessibility is good. I think having more eyes on what's going on is better than not. But I do think the technology needs to be perfected. And, you know, if we have to spend some money on it or bring in new equipment or whatever, and I think Michael's done a fantastic job, so this is not a critique at all. I feel bad for him having to do all the duties he does.
And I don't think people realize that.
Yeah, it's a lot,
Yeah.
and plus he's trying to, you know, watch, if anything, I almost think we need an extra person who just does the technology
Yes,
and can monitor it and
absolutely.
everything. But I think if we perfected the technology, I think that'd be good. And whoever the moderator is on that, you could decide, I mean, the chat's a good idea, but I think that somebody has to moderate that. You know, there's times to use it and times not to use it, depends on the situation. But I think that can be a good idea in certain situations, so I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Mr. O'Leary?
We should absolutely continue it. You know, I just think one of the only things I can think that came out of this pandemic that's actually been a big plus. You know, I think it has provided a far larger segment of the community an opportunity to participate and to watch us. You know, no offense to NORCAM, but we still have trouble getting NORCAM at my house. So my wife thinks that I just took that channel away, but I didn't. You know, we just can't seem to access it. But no, I think, and I've said it before, you know, we should invest in the technology. we should have someone else here to assist the town
Definitely.
administrator. He shouldn't be saddled with this responsibility or with everything else that he has to juggle, and dealing with the five of us and giving us the information. He shouldn't have to worry about doing this. There should be some additional personnel, but we should absolutely continue it. It's a big plus, and I think we should make the investment in the technology, make sure it works.
All right, thank you.
And you?
Yes, what do you think, Madam Chair?
I agree. I think it's been a good thing for us to be able to bring in, everyone in who might normally not be able to be here. But I do agree that it's time. If this is the decision we're making and we want to continue with this, we do have to make an investment and make it better
Seamless.
and easier on RTA. We should get somebody in who can handle that. We've had situations that poor Mr. Gilberto has had to be dealing with. The one I remember the most is when we got, what do they call that?
Zoom bombed.
Zoom bombed. Yes, and poor Mr. Gilberto was trying to deal with that and run a meeting. So an investment in that, I think, should happen. So thank you for your feedback on that. I just wanted to get an idea where you all stood with that. So thank you.
I have two brief things that which I know the new. One is just a question to the administration in relation to the new flood maps. Has the town engineer had a chance to take a look at any change in properties and who may not have been impacted? They don't need an answer right now. Just
I don't have any answer.
I just don't want it to fall by the wayside because when Mr. Kelly came in a few weeks back and highlighted that people were impacted and not even aware of it. And we should know, what segments of the community have been impacted and maybe get people. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was the passing of a wonderful gentleman who was born and raised in the town of North Reading, a Lyman Fancy, at the age of 94 years old. And what a gentleman, what a wonderful guy, and good listener, a tolerant individual, people like me over the years, and grew some mean corn over the years, fed this community for decades. But Lyman actually was former plumbing inspector here for the town of North Reading years and years ago. But born and raised in North Reading, 94 years old, good listener, true gentleman, and always a smile. And again, when you met with the guy, you walked away with a smile. But just a wonderful man. He lived a great life, has a wonderful family, and we mourn his passing, but celebrate the fact that he was with us for so long. But, just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. All right, so for number 6, we are going to actually pass over that tonight. There's some more information we need to get together for that to be more informed on it. So we're going to pass over for it tonight and have it at another meeting, in a future meeting soon. So we can go on to number 7, which is the street acceptance, Eaton Circle, vote to lay out town way. We need the lights. Slacking off over there. Thank you. We do appreciate you. Anytime you can move your seat and you won't have to.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. If you decide to sit somewhere else, we'll get them.
I don't know what we'll do, but we'll figure it out. It's a quick getaway.
We'll get a
Mr.
remote.
Gilberto?
We'll get a remote if we have to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're here to discuss the acceptance of Eaton Circle as completed street construction. The Chair of the Planning Commission, the DPW Director, and Town Planner are all here. I believe all 3 have recommended that the street is ready to be accepted. In the proceedings, we issue a notification to the abutters along the street. We're intending to lay out the way and take the appropriate vote moving forward. We've, I believe, done that. I haven't received any feedback one way or the other. I don't know if there's anybody who is attending in person or virtually with regard to Eaton Circle. If there is, we could certainly hear from them. But I believe the consensus recommendation is to proceed with the street acceptance. There's a motion that's been prepared with regard to this, and there's some documents that would need to be signed if we're ready to do so. And then it would go to town meeting on October 2nd.
Okay.
I think this one Fortunately, it's pretty cut and dry in terms of an acceptance. There are others that we've had that have been more complicated, but this one has been fairly straightforward.
Mrs. Manu Pelli?
We talked about this at our last meeting, right? It's been approved, it's part of the subdivision, it meets all the requirements that were imposed, and the inspector signed off that it's compliant with those requirements, just for
Yeah.
anyone who might be listening to this broadcast of our meeting.
And we have.
That is all correct.
Yeah, we did check that last meeting, we talked about that.
Yes, we did. And the town planner's here, and the chair of the CPC is here. And if you have anything to add, or you want to say anything before the vote, then feel free.
No, I'll just add that we had our consulting engineer do an inspection. This is the same engineer who's been inspecting the work throughout the construction of the subdivision. Did a final inspection, had a few minor things that needed to be repaired. That was, conveyed to the developer. Those things were fixed. We had it re-inspected. Everything was done to satisfaction. The town engineer has also recommended that everything is fine and built properly.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so do we have a motion?
There should be a motion in there.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the layout of Eaton Circle as shown on a plan entitled Street Acceptance Plan Eaton Circle, North Reading, Massachusetts, by Williams and Asparagus
Sorry.
LLC.
She was trying to be
Second.
Mr. O'Leary.
I thought he was done, I'm not reading my motion.
By Williams and Asparagus LLC, John J. Work, 3rd Surveyor, dated July 25th, 2023, by signing said plan and reporting to the town.
Second.
I have a motion, and I have a second from Mrs. Manu Pelli. Do we have any more further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Yep.
Are we signing the plan tonight?
You are, yes. We have it here this
Yeah.
evening, 3 copies.
3?
You're actually signing
Do we
that.
have,
How fun.
It's like,
It's like being a
I feel like it's like the fake, it's like the fake
I
check.
know, because I'm a lefty, right?
I'm just making it easy.
For real? This is what you signed?
No crayons, Mr. Susan. Don't get to color Thank you.
Two-stage system.
In here? You said sign. What's wrong with that pen?
This is a permanent pen that goes on it. That won't stay.
This thing is dead. Thank you. Okay.
This one's too.
It's not, look, it's not working. I mean,
It wasn't.
These are supposedly the
Kate
ones.
used all the ink. There, I did my best.
Sign that.
Okay. You ever watch Daniel Tiger? Do your best.
Yes.
Best is the best for you. Oh, really? Did you? No, your kids were, no.
I know who you're talking about, but
I think it was on the cusp of your youngest, right? Yeah.
yeah.
He's actually pretty good. Did you know how all his episodes are based on Mr. Rogers? Remember, there was a Daniel and the trolley in Mr. Rogers. That's what they made the whole show on.
It's a little.
The tiger with the trolley, and they made the whole show out of it. So they just repeat all his jingles and whatever. And it's actually, what's good is it's the only show, like, you know it's not going to have anything inappropriate when you turn it on.
By the way, that's like we start giving out like, the Happy Gilmore checks. Like the water checks. That's ridiculous. Come on.
Standard practice.
Okay.
What's that again?
Been going on forever.
So Kate, is there any article that, that you fancy that you're gonna ask a million questions about so I can be prepared?
Probably a lot of them.
Which one? They're all
No,
like,
I'm only
most of
kidding.
them are routine.
Oh, no, I'm going to ask them on the route. No, I'm going to keep my notes like I normally do.
Down here somewhere?
What do you mean? Kate got the night out. She got authorized to leave the house.
I did get and Kaylee's with her friends, so
Where'd they go?
probably to Boston.
That's what happens when they don't like you around anymore.
Yep.
I wouldn't believe
No, she was, we gave her a little.
Yeah.
She's,
But they're happy with that. They want to be with their
yeah, exactly.
I wanted to.
Why? It ain't over till it's
You
over.
go to China cuisine, they give you the wrong food, then you come home. This is actually what happened.
By the way, the operation was definitely a long time. Yeah, positive, but I mean,
You see it.
I see it. I mean,
What? Of what?
I'm pretty sure I paid for like $100 worth of egg rolls I haven't gotten in the last year. They owe me a bit. A little bit, yes, certain things. But certain things are done. Not that they're bad, it's just meaning that means the chef was home too. Which happens. It happens.
They're the sweetest people, though.
Don't see anything. No, I just.
The problem with that's all.
They're the sweetest people.
Yes, the issue is mostly as a restaurant, consistency is your biggest attribute.
Yeah, no, that's, I just want to say.
For example.
Oh, we good?
Yeah, I'm
Great.
not afraid to ask them.
All right.
All right. On to
Warrant article.
October 2nd, 2023, Fall Annual Town Meeting Warrant Article, Informational Hearing. Notice of informational hearing. The North Reading Select Board does hereby notify the residents of the town of North Reading that an in-person and virtual informational hearing on the following articles contained in the October 2nd, 2023 town meeting warrant will be held Monday, September 18th, 2023, 8 p.m. We're only 15 minutes off. Town Hall, Room 14. The hearing may also be accessed virtually as follows: via phone and Zoom and internet. This hearing will represent an opportunity for residents to learn more about the articles on the town meeting warrant, to ask questions, and to engage in discussion in advance of the fall annual town meeting. A listing of warrant articles is as follows. If my colleagues agree, I'm going to not go through every article. It's all listed in your warrant, but there are 22 articles. This hearing is held pursuant to sections 18 through 25 of Chapter 30A of the Massachusetts General Laws, the Open Meeting Law. Any interested citizen is welcome to virtually attend and participate in this hearing. Notice of explanation. It is the unanimous desire of the North Reading Select Board to encourage and allow the highest level of public participation in making decisions that affect North Reading. This warrant article hearing is intended to represent an opportunity for extended virtual discussion in advance of town meeting. We sincerely hope that you will join us for this hearing on September 18th, 2023 at 8 p.m. Mr. Gilberto?
Madam Chair, thank you. As is the custom, I will take us through the warrant articles one by one, using this PowerPoint presentation that is up on the screen, but also being broadcast via Zoom and I believe via NORCAM as well. We're going to start with Article 21, only because it relates to the street acceptance that the board just acted on, and we do have
Okay.
the Planning Commission, the Director of Public Works and Town Planner here for it. This is the street acceptance that the board just voted on. The next step is for it to go to town meeting. at which point a vote will be asked for, and then assuming a favorable vote occurs and that there is a favorable recommendation to the Planning Commission, we would then go to reporting the acquisition at the Registry of Deeds within the statutory timelines. And for those who don't know, Eaton Circle is a subdivision off of Mount Vernon Street, kind of right near the intersection with Park Street. Is it a 5-home subdivision or 7? It's between 5 and 7 homes that was completed recently.
If I could just say for the people virtually on Zoom, if you have any questions, please use the raise hand icon on your computer so that the town administrator will see it and will know that you have a question to ask.
Yes, that's great. Not seeing any questions on my end, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I'll continue through the articles in order.
Please.
And I just will note that a recommendation was made by the Select Board. The Finance Committee, I believe, meets Wednesday evening, and I assume will consider whether or not it wishes to offer a recommendation on this article. Article 1 is a customary article to hear and act on reports of town officers and committees. Generally, the committee chairperson or member will approach the town moderator before or at the evening town meeting to offer any report that they wish to make. They get recognized and they provide a report. The Select Board has recommended this article, as is the custom, and the recommendation is to be made by FinCom at the town meeting. Article 2, prior year bills. This is to authorize the payment of bills that were not paid prior to the expiration of the previous fiscal year or an earlier fiscal year. We have one that we know of right now. It's not significant in cost in dollar amount of $40 to be paid from prior expenses related to attendance at a meeting that we received after the close of the year on June 30th. I believe it's intended to be funded out of prior expenses. We'll continue to monitor to see if there are others that come up. Sometimes things come in late. And so we're asked the board to hold on voting any further on the recommendations until the evening of town meeting.
Okay.
Article 3, appropriating funds to the stabilization fund. Fortunate, our fund balance is just under $4.4 million, thanks to transfers that have been made in over many years, and our judicious use or lack of use of those funds, and unfortunately do not need to use them. Recommending passing this over and evaluating it for a transfer in June as part of our larger financing plan for fiscal year 2025. That's the approach that we took last year as well, I believe, and we were successful. And we were able to transfer funds in June. Was it 250 funded? Yeah, it was more than that. Maybe 300. So we were able to put a healthy transfer in the spring and hope to do the same a year from 6 months from now or 8 months from now. And so the board had voted to recommend, so there was a recommendation to be made at town meeting. We asked the board to vote to recommend passing over that article at the evening of town meeting.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move to pass over Article 3 in the warrant. I move to recommend passing over the article.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second by Mr. Studo. All in favor? Any discussion on that? I'm sorry. All in favor?
I mean, I'm in favor of it, provided that we keep on a consistent basis doing this annually, like Mr. Gilberto suggested. So I think we need to build that up.
Yeah.
Just like homes need a 6-month savings for their emergency fund, we should have a certain percentage of our budget set aside as an emergency fund too. Nothing drove that point home clearer than the COVID-19 pandemic, so thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous.
Madam Chair, Article 4 is appropriating funds into our capital improvement stabilization fund. We're recommending a transfer in of $250,000 in free cash, which is in accordance with our capital improvement financing plan. Current balance is just under $1.4 million. The board had previously voted to recommend a town meeting. However, we would urge the board to vote to recommend this article.
Madam Chair, I move to recommend Article 4, transfer funds to Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund in the amount of $250,000.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a second from Mr. O'Leary. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Chair, Article 5, which is a transfer of funds to the solid waste stable. I'll stop myself for a moment. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Long. I don't know that we gave you these motions.
I do have 5.
You do have, okay, you have 5.
I do have 5, yes.
Great. We continue with the hearing.
Kate's been improvising.
This is appropriate money to the solid waste stabilization fund. We typically take the funds left in the appropriations from the previous fiscal year, which become free cash, and set them aside into the solid waste stabilization fund. That's the proposal here from fiscal year 2023, with the dollar amount being $26,304. We would urge the board to vote to recommend this article. Excuse me.
And do I have a motion?
Yep. Madam Chair, I move to recommend Article 5 to appropriate money to Solid Waste Stabilization Fund.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion to recommend Article 5. I have a second from Mr. O'Leary. Any discussion? Mrs. Minnie-Pelli?
Are we anticipating an increase to the cost of the waste removal program, that we would be keeping that surplus in? I know we talked about, during our ARPA discussion, we talked about some funds that might be appropriate towards buying, I think, receptacles or something like that when we go to a different type of hauling. But we're charging a fee for this, so the premise being we shouldn't have a surplus really unless it's going right back into the program. Are we expecting some other costs associated with it?
Madam Chair, through you, so this stabilization fund exists to preserve any surplus that we may see at the end of a year for this $1.4 million program, I think it is. So these funds would be added to the existing balance of $149,000, and while we're still looking at what the scenario will look like for fiscal year 2025, it is likely that a rate increase is going to be necessary. We will likely look to this as a potential funding source to offset the amount of that rate increase. But something we do need to keep an eye on is the advancement of technology and whether or not we want to look to go to some sort of an automated collection program, acquiring toters, which has a cost that comes with it. So, we've been setting this money aside on behalf of the ratepayers, not commingling it with the taxpayers, with the general fund. And so it is there, with a balance going up to about $175,000 on hand. But to answer the question, we probably will have to look at the rate, and I anticipate, that not having raised it for either 2 or 3 years at this point, we'll have to adjust it. But we'll look to utilize this to offset the impact to the extent that we can.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrera. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And I'll add that I do foresee the totes, or, whatever you want to call it, probably coming. Most of the towns I've seen have them, and it is going to be an investment. It is going to be a big cost, so we should be prepared for that too. All right, so I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion on this?
You do have a motion?
Yeah,
I read it, yeah.
Okay, good.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think you seconded it.
We were in discussion. Yeah, you seconded
We're
it.
still on 5? Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Mr. Gilberto?
Thank you. Article 6, appropriate funding to participating funding arrangement fund. This is a place where we transfer the surplus from our active employee health insurance plan from the last fiscal year. Balance is approaching $2 million, a significant balance that puts us in a really great position in terms of any potential issues that we might see. We did dip into that for fiscal year 2024 to try to control the rate increase both for the town and for our employees. The recommended transfer amount, they have it on there at $187,263. That is that's a preliminary number. We're still, this is 2 more weeks, Ms. Delvin, of claims that we're going to be reviewing. So the board has already voted to recommend the article in principle because we are going to be recommending a transfer, but we'll give a final number at the evening of town meeting once we have it.
Okay.
And again, this is only the town's share of the premium, which is about 70%. Madam Chair, through you, Article 7, amending the fiscal year 2024 operating budget. There are 3 known adjustments that have been proposed. I'll start with the $179,000 from free cash for debt service. I'm going to try to explain this to the extent that I can. Ms. Galvin can correct me if I misstated, but this goes back to fiscal year 2020. In which we had a pay down on debt service that we made to the lending agency, but didn't account for properly on the town's books, which resulted in the dollar amount becoming free cash in a prior fiscal year. It wasn't this year. It would have been 2 years ago now, right? So we want to make that account whole by making this transfer by utilizing free cash. You know, it has the look of using free cash for a recurring cost, but in reality, it's for a bill that we didn't. It was a bill that was paid, but we didn't account for properly 2 years ago, three years ago at this point. But a vote is required to correct it. So that's $179,000 that we're proposing to utilize from free cash, and the payment was related to the middle high school project. Just sort of. The second item, I'm going to skip one and come back to the recreation enterprise. The water infrastructure stabilization fund. When the rate was set by the board in June, we factored in a transfer in from water infrastructure stabilization in the amount of $240,766. It was part of our rate stabilization approach over multiple fiscal years. We did the same thing a year ago. We weren't required to actually make the transfer because we sold so much water due to the dry summer that we had in 2022. This has not been the case this year, although we are doing probably better than I think folks would have expected based on our projections. We've not sold anywhere near as much water this past summer, as you know, from the drought, compared to the drought summer. But I think from a housekeeping standpoint, since we voted a budget and a rate that factored on this, we should make that transfer regardless. If it's not spent, so to speak, or if their revenues exceed, their expenditures in the fiscal year, as you know, it becomes a retained earning at the end of this year into next year, available for whatever purpose we choose. So I felt we should put that on there, even though we didn't do it last year. Again, it's not unexpected. It was part of the rate calculation that we had. We were at the rate hearing in June. The third item, a request to increase the recreation enterprise expenses to be funded by recreation revenue in the amount of $69,450. It's a request that's come into the finance director and I from the public services director and the parks and recreation director as well, Mr. Tilton, both of whom are here this evening, joined by Rita Mullen, the chair of the recreation committee. I'll do my best to sort of speak to that at the moment, which is that they have seen a continued uptick in activity and maintenance that they required. I think the board is aware that they came here looking to add a 4th maintenance position. Have that right? We weren't able to fund that at that point in time. The request was to fund it out of the general fund, and it's part of the budget balancing exercise. We weren't able to fund it, but they have needs nonetheless. This is not a request to hire a person. It's a request for contracted services, as I understand it, to try to keep up with maintenance issues that they believe they can fund out of recreation revenues. So it's not being requested from the general fund. So those 3 have come in. I'm going to stop. I know there was discussion about Hillview, Mrs. Galvin, but I don't know that I ever saw a final number on that. Or whether
they were working on it.
They're working on it, okay. So there may be an adjustment that I think is tied to their revenue projections and adjusting their expenditure to reflect that. Is that right?
Right. I believe it had to do with there was an uptick in the golf, which required more of a percentage being paid out to the golf facilities, so they needed to calculate how much more they were going to need.
Okay. So contractual adjustment. So we expect we'll have that number at the next meeting, on the evening of town meeting, for a vote, whatever it might be. I'm not suggesting a vote to recommend or not be taken at this point, only because it's in flux and there's more to do. I tried to present sort of a summary of these items. There are other folks that are here if there are any further questions. The one thing I would say is, we have a significant subsidy that I think we're all aware that we provide to Parks and Recreation, and we've struggled to maintain that, and we certainly weren't able to expand it. So even if we do proceed with this request, I'm not sure what it looks like next fiscal year, I mean fiscal year 2025, whether your revenues will keep up or not, and how that will all work. But as I understand, there's a request for contracted services for fiscal year 24. Is that correct?
I think it's a result of.
Can you come?
Sorry.
Yeah,
You can come right here if you want.
yeah, over here.
So it's more so a result of the recreation programs doing much better, but it also entailed them to hire more people because of the programs that they run. So I mean, it's just a mechanism to amend the budget that way. And we're trying to use some of these revenues to do repairs on the recreation center that needs it, and just contract out. I mean, we don't have the manpower to take care of everything ourselves, so that's the reasoning by it.
All good.
Any other,
It's all good stuff.
Yeah, that is good stuff. Any of my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Tolton?
I just have,
Yes?
just not a party, but the administrator, so are you recommending this?
I guess I'm cautiously recommending it. And when I say that, it's because I know that, I expect from our conversations that I've heard from Ms. Galvin, that this is something that was going to materialize in a fiscal year 2025 budget request as well. And, whether or not we're able to sustain that on the whole is I think, a significant question mark.
Yeah.
But where it's not a personnel-related request, and it could be an opportunity for, some additional catch-up to the work you've already been doing for maintenance. I don't sit here and necessarily object to it at this point. I do feel the need to say, just because the bottom line operating budget would show an increase of this amount next year, it's going to be hard for me to come into the budget process, and I don't want to speak for Mrs. Galvin, but I kind of will. I think we're both going to struggle to say, okay, that's the baseline, we're going to move forward to a new number from there, because there's, again, that significant subsidy that we've struggled to maintain each year, that's in place. So it's hard to sit here and commit to that beyond, this particular fiscal year.
So in other words, this is a one-time thing.
Mr. Wallner?
At this point, that's how I'm looking at it.
Mr. O'Leary,
Yeah,
continue.
so again, I don't have any problem making a recommendation on this article right now because administrator is tacitly recommending this. Everything else is pretty much self-explanatory. As far as the Hillview expenses, that's a contractual obligation we have to the vendor that runs the course. So that's just a number that needs to be plugged in there. So, Madam Chair, I move to recommend as presented.
Do we have an official motion?
No, we don't.
Okay. Just before you do that, was
Okay.
there anyone else who wanted, Mrs. Minkelli?
Right. I would hesitate to recommend unless we have an actual figure first, but I understand the concept of why you moved for that, but I would want to see the actual figure before we recommend, and then the figure comes through.
Just as far as the Hillview specifically, that number is going to be dictated by what the revenue was. In other words, as part of their contract, they get a certain percentage of revenue. So once the final revenue figures are in, the GFMI gets their piece of the pie after the books are basically closed. And it's just a contractual obligation. It just hasn't been reconciled yet. So it's not all that means is, again, golf revenue was up, so we owe them a little bit more than what they anticipated, which again is a good thing. So it's just a question of plugging the figure in there. So it's not as though the enterprise fund is going to be taking the type of a hit, because that means the enterprise fund is actually increased because the revenue is increased, and we owe GFMI a little more money.
I'd still have questions for Mr. Tilton too, though,
Sure.
actually. That's okay.
I'm just going to add on to, are you feeling that we should be recommending the other two and waiting till town meeting to recommend Hillview when we have a number?
So I did want to just, so we're talking about a recommendation to adjust the enterprise fund, really,
Right.
as it was voted, but make it an adjustment because there's going to be an increase to that, right? To that enterprise
There's an
fund.
increase to the expense to the
Right.
enterprise.
Increase to the
expenses of the
expenses
enterprise.
Of the enterprise.
Because the enterprise derived more revenue. Because it derived more revenue, it has an increased expense to the GFMI. So that's basically what it means is
To pay out to them, in other
to
words.
pay them, yeah.
Right,
He'll
because
be
they
made-
get a
he'll be made more
percentage.
money.
Yeah.
So they get a little piece of the pie.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense to me, Madam Chair. I don't know if you may I just do a couple of follow-ups?
Please.
Mr. Tilton, I remember when you presented your department budget, you had asked for an additional employee because you had less, workforce to be able to get the fields maintained. Is this a landscaping company that you're intending to hire? What is the vendor? Who is the vendor, or what?
This is actually revenue generated from recreation programs. It's not anything that was changed on the park side of revenue. So this is from adding more programs and them doing really well in the program. So the revenue changing, the same thing, the expenses changed with, they have people contracted that teach the programs. This is just a result of how well they did. So we adjusting the budget.
I guess I'm asking you what specific contractors you are going to be paying with this. What
I think we're
expense?
looking toward...
All across the board, in other words? Or?
No, I think it's more towards the recreational side, like the recreation center needs a lot of work done, things like that. It's on the recreation side of Parks and Rec.
So it's just for like upkeep?
Yeah, it's things that need to be done, yep.
There's I don't know, I don't want to call it a snack shack there, but there's a structure there that the squirrels are getting in and out of that's not in use, that the different groups could probably, make an arrangement and say, we'll bring in and use it to raise money for us, we'll give you half the proceeds. There could be another generating source for the Parks and Rec department. Why isn't that being upkept and used for the benefit of people that are in the park?
It's been offered. We just, that's groups that just don't choose not to use it. We've done it in the past when we had it, and it didn't really turn out to be that profitable. And when we ran it, we actually had people that were on staff that volunteered on Saturdays and Sundays to do it and make it work. It just didn't prove profitable. We have offered it to the groups, and they have their own concession stands like at McGuire, so same idea, they would rather not, they'd rather just do their own thing. It's really pretty much soccer that would be able to utilize it. They're the ones that use IRP fields the most, and they chose not to.
I think maybe that in a tiny microcosm, what Hillview does by leasing to, a different manager or something, maybe we should consider that just for people that use the parks on a regular basis. Look into something like that, where we retain a vendor that's going to open up on the weekends to make some money, and we get a percentage of their profits or something like that. And also, we just have to upkeep the building because we don't want it to be, it's another one of those structures that we don't want it to be.
Yeah, we do. We
messy.
try to do the best we can with the time we have.
Yeah.
It's cleaned continuously, so it's still inspected. I've never seen any squirrels in there, and we've never seen any signs of any
Squirrels
rodents
seem to be
at
a
all.
hot topic tonight. Squirrel
Just the tattoos.
And rainbows was second choice.
Mrs. Manning,
No,
continue.
I'm all set. I'd like to see you ask for that again, during that employee again, or that work, project your staff that you need, because I know it's not as many hands doing a lot of work there for the Parks and Rec, and we really want to do the best we can to upkeep everything that's there in
We're
every
trying.
one of the parks. Thank you.
Mr. Studo, anything? Mr. Wallner, Mr. O'Leary, anything? I was actually thinking the same as Mrs. Manupelli. I was going to ask you if you could give examples of where that extra money was going, but it sounds like it's hard for you to narrow that down. It's just basically upkeep.
Yes, yes. It's things that need to be done, that need to be taken care of.
Okay. Right. Did we make that motion?
Yeah, I did.
And did we
Let's
have?
do it to recommend.
Oh, yes, and.
Was it second?
Yes, you did. You
Yes.
started it and I stopped you, I'm sorry.
That's it, yeah. So move to recommend.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Studo. Any more discussion?
All 4 of those, so water infrastructure stabilization, rec enterprise, free cash to debt service, and Hillview Enterprise is in that vote.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay, so I have the motion, you have the motion, and I have the second from Mr. Studo. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Gilberto? I'm sorry, we're still monitoring the Zoom.
I'm keeping an eye on it.
Okay. And,
I don't see it.
okay, and of course, anybody in the audience, if you have a question, just raise your hand. Okay. Mr. Gilberto?
Madam Chair, through you, rescinding an authorization to borrow. I'll get one item to be rescinded based upon the board's earlier vote for the use of ARPA funding for the North and Central Street intersection design and construction. So this would be a vote that would be required in order to fulfill that. And again, having the project will still be completed in the timeline that it was expected with funding coming from the American Rescue Plan Act. I would encourage the board to vote to recommend the article.
Do I have a motion for that?
Move to recommend.
Yeah, there's your motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. O'Leary. I have a second from Mr. Studo. Any further discussion on that? Article 8? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Article 9, Mr. Gilberto?
Madam Chair, through you, Article 9, and this is a revisiting of some conversation that's already had, and I guess I would just start my comments by saying that we have 3 projects that are on here that I think are important projects. 2 of them are projects that we have started and do not have sufficient funding to complete. One of them is a project that has come up in recent weeks that's infrastructure in nature. And while we certainly could have quite a bit of discussion here this evening, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee is going to meet on Wednesday morning and review these 3 projects. And I would urge the board to certainly allow that process to happen and to receive their feedback. I see Mr. Keller is on here, and I want to thank him for quickly pulling together a meeting to review these 3 projects with the involved departments, boards, and committees. But I will just review them quickly, which is first to say that a Hood School boiler replacement, which was funded in June for $225,000. The working shortfall that we believe we have in that project working with the school department is $75,000. And they will present that request, review that request at the Capital Improvement Planning Committee meeting, which is a virtual meeting that you can access online on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. You just go to the town clerk's calendar to view it for anyone who's watching this hearing. Secondly, for Kid Spot, which would supplement $150,000 in state grants and $75,000 in retained earnings. As a typo on there. I wrote 100, it should be 150 in state grants. They are seeking $250,000 in order to replace with improved disability access and newer equipment, the equipment that was the aged equipment that needed to be removed from Kid Spot. So they're asking for an additional $250,000. I do want to note that there is a state grant that the Public Services Director has submitted. I believe it's approximately $140,000, is that right? That we're waiting on, but I don't think that we'll have an answer on come October town meeting. So my recommendation, should this come out of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, is probably going to be that we would reduce the appropriations, the expenditure, by whatever amount is received in grants, to make sure that they, one way or the other, that's what comes through, assuming that that's what comes out of capital planning. And then the third thing that I will identify was submitted as an ARPA project. This says 500, it's actually $600,000 that's being requested for Burroughs Road design and construction. So Burroughs Road, where it comes really close to Martin's Pond, there are a series of 4 pipes that carry the pond under the road to the brook. Is it Martin's Brook, that location? Is that right, Martin? 3 of them are together. They're considered a bridge, Mr. Breeze, right? One of them is just beyond that, headed, I guess it would be westbound. That's kind of on its own. It's a culvert on its own. And we've had a couple of sinkholes that have shown up at this location that have caused our attention to be increased as we're looking at it. They've been repaired by the DPW pretty quickly with patches poured in place over them. There are a number of differences in this location when compared to our recent discussions concerning Chestnut Street. Probably the biggest is that the pipes are much smaller than what's in place. There are 2 very large pipes that carry the Ipswich River under Chestnut Street. These are a series of 4, 3 together, 1 separate, much smaller pipes that carry Martin's Pond underneath the road. We are eagerly looking and exploring some sort of a repair or replacement in kind of the structures that are there because of their size and because of the fact that from our current interpretations, we don't have a free-flowing waterway there. We have what's effectively the road holding back the pond and then the water coming through underneath. We are looking for $600,000 for design and construction with the intent of making either doing a lining of the pipes of some sort or similar repair or replacement with a similar structure. That's the goal. As we've seen, time is of the essence with these things. We are looking to request a combined design and construction appropriation with the goal of doing the repair. As we go through the design process and the permitting process, if we encounter that we're not able to do a repair, we would probably continue utilizing that funding towards a design for a permanent replacement in order to continue making progress at the location. So I know it was submitted as an ARPA funding request. We didn't really have too much discussion about it, but wanted to provide that as an update. And I know there was some recent social media activity as well, observing it, and I actually talked with a resident down there, that we were aware of the situation and looking seriously at a permanent repair to the location because of how vital an access road it is in and out of that neighborhood. So DPW has been very active the past couple of weeks with engineers, talking to vendors, trying to figure out our best path forward with regard to that location. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair.
In regards to that, I will be first asking my colleagues for questions, but for the public that's viewing and anyone in the audience, there was a lot of misinformation on social media about this topic, so if you would like your questions answered, this would be a good time to raise your hand. So, but first, Mr. O'Leary.
Just the source of funding for these projects?
Madam Chair, through you, I believe we're certainly looking at free cash for both the first 2, $75,000 for Hood School and $250,000 for Kids Spot. Whether we go with the free cash appropriation, do we have that calculated free cash in the original discussion we had, Marianne? We did. So I think we're kind of targeting free cash for all 3 of them, but we're also trying to obtain a certified free cash number from the Department of Revenue, which we believe we will have. We've already had quite a bit of back and forth answering questions, but the intention is to try to do free cash.
All 3.
All 3, yes.
Thank you.
And again, I'll reiterate that the Capital Improvement Committee is meeting Wednesday morning to discuss these. We haven't been able to do that yet, so
I just think we should wait till we hear from the capital improvement planning, but I just was curious as to what the source of funding was.
So when I attended the CIPC meeting on Hood, The presentation incorporated some rebates, that there was a long discussion about this boiler, and actually the anticipation that there would be a receipt of a rebate of the funds. Mr. Kelleher can correct me if I'm wrong, but, or I don't know if, well, Mr. Kelleher can correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole premise of that moving up in the queue to be done was the availability of rebates, from my recollection. So I'd like to hear specifics on that, because other projects, like I said, got less of a rating because there was this reimbursement available. So to come back now and ask for even more, I'd like a definitive, I won't vote to recommend this unless I have a definitive explanation why there needs to be a supplement now, after that was all, I think it was addressed at 2 separate meetings from my recollection. With regard to the kid spot, that I know that we just had a presentation about enterprise, and we heard about this at the last meeting, but there is a fund, an enterprise fund, that Parks and Rec has available to be able to do these types of maintenance projects. And I know at our last meeting, we had a lot of back and forth about this, but this was a project that was moved up for approval, and it was, we heard that the decision to take equipment out was because there was going to be a $50,000 grant that they were going to lose, but really no clear plan then to replace it. So that's just not a good way to proceed, and I would not be in favor of, there was a lot of chatter, it got taken to social media, why is the board not replacing the equipment there? We really need to have a plan in motion. The equipment should have stayed there till there was a plan in motion so people could use it. And if it was unsafe, the people that had taken it to social media to talk about the board should be talking to the people on social media and say, hold on a second, it's misinformation. We had to remove it. It wasn't safe for kids to use it. We're really sorry. We didn't have a plan in place to replace it, and now we have to find more money to replace it. But we couldn't leave it there because kids were going to get hurt. So the people that take it to social media really should put that accurate information out there. We're not going to do it because we're bound by open meeting law. So we can't take it to the street. We want the correct information and the accurate information. And the people that are doing these plans and renovations and engaging with the vendors, they should really address it, because we're members of a public body that should, can't do that. But the people that are responsible for the decision to remove the equipment, they should really correct that with people. So I'd want more information about what's the plan? What are you putting in there? I heard about accessible equipment. Do we even know what that is? Who's going to put it in? A while back, I read about someone selling the stuff that was removed, that we're saying to people is unsafe, that's why it had to be removed, yet someone sold it. It couldn't have been that unsafe because someone was selling it, so that was part of the transaction too. So I think it's the same equipment. I could be misinforming the public, but I'm pretty sure it was the same equipment. So we should have and know a full plan in motion here. Has this been out to bid to vendors? Do we know about that? Do we know about that stuff? And as far as boroughs, I don't even see that as a wish list item. I see that as an emergency that I can tell you right now, I would vote for that this moment to get that done. That is too important. We know that's critical infrastructure. That's entirely a safety issue. So that I can see, do that right away to get that taken care of. And there's probably more under there that we probably don't even know about that we probably have to expand on the replacement of. Hopefully not, but, And that's the one someone said was they put that a plate was put over it, right? You told us last meeting.
There was a plate over it, yes.
Put over it. And I heard about the chatter about the misinformation. There's nothing we can do about that. hopefully we can get someone in that's going to handle those kind of things, and right away when people post something that's wrong, that it gets addressed and corrected. The decisions aren't made to harm people. They're actually made to keep people safe. A road gets closed because you can't drive on it because there's sinkholes and someone's going to get hurt. That's why roads get closed. That's why plates are put over holes in the road so nobody gets hurt. So, I would say yes to that right now because we know that's only going to grow into a tremendous problem if we don't address it. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And before I go further, I think you raised some questions that the Parks and Rec Director has come up to the table, and I think you might want to clarify.
Yeah, there was a lot of misperception. A lot of this was the timing of the funding we got. The $50,000, there was a time limit that we had to expend or we would have lost it. That clearly wasn't going to take care of the project. Kids Spot was unsafe. We'd have to keep putting Band-Aids on it all the time, to try and keep it open. But it was very old. The wooden structures weren't safe. So we did get the $50,000, and then we were told, in the newspaper, we were told that Representative Jones and Senator Tarr got us another $150,000 towards Kids Spot. But when that happens, we never know when it's going to actually be released by the governor. So that came much later, and it was actually turned out to be $100,000. So then that's when the committee decided that still wasn't going to be enough. So we really didn't have a number of what we had to work with on a budget. So we were trying to figure out what we could do with that money. The $50,000, we put out the removal of all the old structures out to bid, and that was a false thing on social media. None of that equipment was sold. None of it was sold. So that was social media put that out there. It was donated to a children's fund that they put on in New Hampshire, that they provide Christmas for 500 kids, and they were using it just for a set for Christmas story. They weren't using it as a playground because it's not safe. So that was all misconception. No one sold anything. It was just they had the right to do with it. Part of their contract was to dispose of it. What they did with it, we didn't know at the time, but they clearly told us that that's what they did. They didn't sell it, they didn't make any money off of anything. So we really didn't have a full idea of what it was going to cost because the prices went up, and the getting ADA compliance with that land has to be surveyed, has to be, to bring it in compliance. It never was. So we hired a design consultant, and actually just last Thursday, so we're still getting information on what it's going to cost us, and we're just in the preliminary stages of that, but we know 175 is not going to do it. So we are looking for the funding to make this complete. We've had public meetings where they reached out. We've met with Commission on Disabilities, and had public input in surveys to see what they wanted to see with the project. So we've taken all that advice, and we're working with a consultant now, and we're just in the beginning steps of it.
Can I ask a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Yeah, could I just, for 1 second, there was something else I wanted Mr. Tilton to clarify, because the way I understand it, and I might be wrong, but the enterprise fund, as I understand it, cannot be used for the playgrounds. It can only be used for recreation. Can you clarify that?
Madam Chair, if you don't mind. Enterprise activities, just like the Hillview, tend to be revenue-generating activities, and you use the enterprise account to pay expenses related to those revenues. So the most enterprise component of the Parks and Rec Department is, of course, our recreation programs, which charge a fee, and then they pay vendors to operate the programs. The parks component of the program maintains 100 acres of which very few acres generate any revenue. So, soccer fields, we should be able to pay for all the soccer field maintenance costs from that enterprise, but playgrounds are a public good that generate no revenue. So when there are excess retained earnings, the committee recommended to support the playground with that last year with the town meeting. But generally, its operations are intended to support revenue-generating activities with enterprise expenses.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Rainey Kelly, go ahead.
No, that doesn't mean it can't be used to improve parks, the playground equipment. That's a decision that's made to put it back into the fields and upkeep and maintenance. Plus, we always supplement the maintenance of the park. So as a component of, just like the basketball court is a component of the McGuire Field, and the kids' spot is a component of it, where people are going to soccer and they're utilizing both of them, that certainly could be considered as an appropriate use of those funds. I disagree with that, but I understand what you're saying. I recognize that we typically have to supplement the funding for maintenance. But what I'm saying is have a plan that we're not just guessworking at it, but how much is the cost of your design consultant? What are we paying the design consultant?
Well, right now, we started out paying hourly because we don't know what the budget's going to be until after we figure out what we're going to have for funds available. So we hired them as an hourly rate instead of the contract that we decided on for the full project. So until then, until we know what we have for available funds, we're going on an hourly rate.
So you're not sure how much the design consultant is?
We do, but we don't know what the budget's going to be, so we're just moving. We hired them hourly to see what available funds we're going to have after the town meeting, and we'll decide then.
Yes.
So, Madam Chair, through you, we do have, so the designers first work with us was a cost estimate, and we did include the full design cost in there of $33,700 to include their initial design work and site plans, overseeing the bids, and then construction oversight to ensure that what's built is compliant with ADA. So that's the initial budget, assuming that we do get the 250 and we move forward with a project of $475,000 for the budget.
So the design alone is, the budget that you have earmarked is $33,000. Coming out of what funds?
We have existing $175,000 committed to the project, and the design is for the full scope of what Kids Spot would be if we receive the 250.
And is that including, that's only the design work, that's not including the cost of surveying?
We anticipate a very low-cost survey that we can announce at a later date. So.
I don't understand design to what we're gonna get at the end of the line. It's a spot, you know what was there, you know what you want there, here's the design, here's the cost, not design up to what we're gonna get for money. It's the reverse. Give us a design and we go and say, this is how much we need. I'm all set, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Studo.
So, for the boiler replacement, yeah, I want to hear it too, because I was part of those meetings as well last year about the rebate, although, I mean, I'm sure there's some cost overrun reason, but, or maybe the rebate wasn't as lucrative, but we'll see. Yeah, the Ballers Road, there's really nothing to talk about. You got to do it. I mean, there's no hope. I mean, it is what it is. Okay? The priority of the town is to keep citizens safe, and this is one way to do it with roads, so there's not really, I don't think it's open for discussion. On the Kids Spot, you know what I think the biggest issue was? Expectations. For better or for worse, people thought that this thing was, we tear it down on Monday, shovel ready, we start putting in the new one on Wednesday. It was, to me, that is where everyone went haywire, the expectation. So the biggest complaint on social media is that, you know, why they rip it out, if whatever, and you explained it, right? But it seems that either, like many things in town, whether or not you explained it, they don't believe you because it's not what someone wants, which is, you know, seems to happen with every single thing we talk about. Or just really it's something where the expectation wasn't set. Like I wasn't at that, I couldn't make it at that meeting that you guys had at the field, right, when you took feedback, but I feel that is where I see that the miscommunication was with the general public, that we're doing this now. I mean, hindsight's easy. We're doing this now because we don't want to lose out on this money, but just understand that we're probably, you know, waiting for a while. I mean, this is, you know, and this happens, I know. It even happens in my previous hometown where there's a pretty big park project that I think is, what, 9 months late? It's late. But again, it was the same thing where people were all up in arms, but then if you went all the way back and rewound the tape, it should have been understood, but you know, maybe everyone was given too much credit to just get it. So that's where I just want to say. So, I mean, in regards to the funding, I do think what is difficult, and I'm going to be part of this CIPC meeting, and I already heard a little bit from a financial planning meeting that I think the number one complaint is that it is very difficult because we're working in reverse. That's a problem, you know, because it's not an open-ended checkbook and it's a zero-sum game with the pie we have. So I think the harder part, and I can already see this going to pop up at this meeting on Wednesday, is going to be, well, do they need that because they know for sure? And I can't answer that question. You know, because it can be that after the surveying, right, my understanding is that someone can come and say, this awesome thing you wanted, because I was at that rec meeting and I said, let's see what it would look like if we got something for everybody, for whether or not you agree with it, and see if we have to scale back. But like, the first question that's going to be up at CIPC is going to be, if the survey comes back and says we can't need it and we appropriated it, what if we gave Kids Spot $250,000 and didn't do something else? Because on the hierarchy of all the things that need to be done. So I just think that going forward, not just for this, but I think it was definitely where if somebody had even said, in hindsight it's easy, that, hey, we're ripping it out for safety, but don't expect to have this, you know, next month, we probably could have saved about 60-70% of the chatter, because then it would have been like, we were told that we're doing this for safety, you know. That, and again, I think people got up in arms when 6 months old couldn't play at IRP. I'm not sure. Again, I have kids of all ages. I didn't see an issue with it, but I guess it's a big deal. So, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Welcome. Mr. Wallner?
I can't respond to social chatter. I think we just need to know what the final plan is. I mean, I think it's what you said. We just don't know what this looks like overall. I could feel good about doing it, but I just don't know what it looks like at the end. And I know you have variables, but still, maybe it's just too early for it to be on here, I'm not sure. But it looks like, you know, you have two different designs that are going to happen depending on where the funding is coming from. And but I would think that if you did the in-between design, that you would be thinking that there'd be more money coming later through grants, that would be the full design. So maybe I'm wrong about it, but that's kind of what it sounds like. In either case, it would be nice to tangibly know what that looks like, or what it, yeah.
So with the, we initially, with the money we had available, we're going to try and make it done with that amount of money. But after going through the process of the equipment and the site work that needed to be done, we knew that wasn't going to be enough. I was ready to move forward with the amount of money, but I just know all the residents in town. Then you talk about social media. If we just went there and put what we could afford there, they'd be up in arms. We wouldn't have, it wouldn't be anywhere comparable to what Kids Spot was, to make it whole, to have, make it inclusive for handicapped kids, make it ADA accessible, be in compliance with that. If we just did it with $175,000, we would be hearing a lot more uproar from the community. And so that's why we decided, I went to Parks and Rec, and then before that, and that's why they voted to put in the retained earnings to help it. And then we were talking with grants we could get to get more, and then we tried to approach you for the ARPA funding, because you said that might be available. We're just trying to make this thing back the way it was and make it safe for the kids and improve it. It was 30 years old, and it definitely needed to come down for safety reasons. I mean, it was wooden structures, chains were breaking, wood was breaking, it was splintering, and it needed to be done. We did utilize that $50,000. I thought we utilized that pretty smart. We put the demolition out to bid. We got a lower cost than we thought. We still had something like $23,000 left that had to be spent, so we were proactive, and we already pre-ordered all the safety matting, like rubber matting that's going to go with enough to cover that whole area when it's done, so it makes it more accessible, and it would be a lot cheaper than doing a poured-in-place rubber that you see in a lot of the new playgrounds around. But this was an alternative, and we were proactive. We had to spend the $22,000 left, and we did it, so we have that already in place for this project. So now it's just a matter of getting the appropriate accessibility, making safe, and upgrading and making sure it's inclusive for toddlers and separate section for older kids. Because you don't want them together. You don't want big kids running into a toddler section because they're coming across the soccer field. So we put that all in mind, and then we started reaching out, looking at playgrounds ourselves, and came to the realization that if we want to make this whole and make the community happy, then we needed more funding. And that's the reason why we come to you.
Would the money that you're asking for, would this be the ultimate design, the best this would be?
No, but not necessarily. It'd be close, but we'd still, we even talked about doing things in phases, so it didn't all happen this year, but that amount of money wasn't going to put anything there and was going to upset the whole community.
Yes. So, Madam Chair, through you. So we worked with our designer and asked them initially, like, what's your best judgment? What would a playground this size with this landscape cost? And they gave us a higher figure than the 250 that we have. We asked them to scale out things that might be something we can complete in a phase 2 with additional fundraising. So the 250 is really bare bones. It's to get the play equipment in place and the ADA pathways. It doesn't necessarily mean any benches or tables or extra landscaping, no fencing. And I know parents want fencing, but we're looking at what's the minimum budget that we could get all of the equipment installed in 1 year.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So that is phase 1. Phase 2 would be to complete it.
Yeah.
Fencing and site
Yeah.
furnishings and stuff.
And the total amount I heard was $500,000, is that right?
Close, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. O'Leary?
Well, this gets you, but based on the conversation last meeting, I thought it was like 485, whatever, 450 to $500,000. You've got the 150, the 250, that's 400, 475. So would you say this doesn't complete it?
The extra site stuff like fencing probably wouldn't include fencing. We don't know. I mean, this is initial discussions with the designer.
Right.
So these prices, I mean, even that I looked at just today talking to them, she's brought down because of it was just they've only been out there once. We haven't actually met them, so the price could come down, and then we could afford those other things. That's our hope.
My thoughts at this point, again, the process has been very fractured.
It's convoluted. It's a convoluted process.
Yeah,
so
it's
far.
been very convoluted and rather fractured. And again, we're just getting more and more information as we go along here. But there's no doubt that, Kid Spot, again, as we said before, is a gathering spot, is part of the community, is a vital part of the community, and has safety issues that need to be addressed, plain and simple. And so, short of total destruction and no replacement of it, you had some additional funds to get it going again. I think had we been presented, I know we sitting here being presented, listen, we're going to have $150,000 in, you're going to do a $75,000 match from retained earnings, can raise and appropriate or free cash, a match, I probably would have been receptive to the whole thing if it had been presented that way. So this is what's making it difficult. And I'm still receptive to it. I think Kid Spot needs to be put back together and hopefully some semblance of better than what was there before in addressing the ADA compliance first and foremost, but also all age groups being able to participate that way. So, so I'm embracing the whole thing here, and I know that other things are now taking a back seat as far as the capital improvement plan and all the rest. But it still needs to be done. We need to address Kid Spot. Whether it's done in 3 phases or whether it's done now. I think had it been presented in a different fashion, where this is what we have, can we match it? I guess the answer would have been yes. Maybe not made it for capital improvement planning, but I think general populace and the town meeting would be a yes. So, I think we need to move forward on it. As far as the $75,000, as far as the boiler replacement, that's another no-brainer. We've already appropriated $225,000. The boiler needs to be replaced. They haven't got a completed project here, or even a complete figure yet. And I don't believe there's any rebates involved with that. It was with something different boiler. The administrator in the library, not the school. But the fact still remains, the boiler needs to be replaced. And we haven't appropriated enough money to do it, so whatever it takes to complete the project needs to be done. And Burroughs Road is a safety issue. It's town infrastructure. It's a no-brainer. Nothing to talk about. So it's like, the only way we can kick around a little bit more is Kid Spot. Maybe the school has to sharpen their pencil and find out a little bit more for us, but the school needs a boiler. Burroughs Road needs some bridges here. It needs access. And Kid Spot needs to be replaced. Just to what degree? Does this get us whole? We hope so, but we don't know for sure. It gets us much closer to where we were before. So, yes, it should go to Capital Improvement Planning Committee. It should kick it around a little bit more. But, we've been talking a lot about stuff that we probably shouldn't be talking about very long. Needs to be done.
That's what we do, though, here.
I know that's what we do. No, it's a good public deliberation. It's good.
Yeah.
But the stuff needs to be done. It needs to be addressed. And, we can be constructively critical as to the presentation, as to the order in which we've gotten things. But the fact remains, Kid Spot needed to be replaced. It wasn't safe. And we need to bring it up to ADA standards. And it's an integral part of the community that needs to be redone. Boiler needs to be replaced. We didn't appropriate enough money. The bridge was collapsing here. Could fill in the holes on a temporary basis. We need to fix it.
Okay. Thank you.
So anyway, I think we should make a recommendation to town meeting, but my inclination is to support, just for whoever cares.
I believe the recommendation should be made at town meeting because we still need to hear from the Capital Improvement Committee. But I would tend to agree with you, Mr. O'Leary. I think all 3 of these need to be taken care of, but I will hold back my comments until after the meeting Wednesday morning. I would like to ask if anyone on Zoom is... No?
Not seeing anybody, Madam Chair.
And anyone else in the audience? Questions or anything? Okay. All right. I think we can move on.
Madam Chair, through you, Article 10, 20 Elm Street, appropriate funding for legal expenses. I'm evaluating that with council
Thank you.
regarding the amount needed, if any. So we'll ask the board to consider this further the evening of town meeting. Article 11, appropriating money for fire station design development and construction documents. Board has previously voted to designate $700 and I think it was $80,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funding. We'll be recommending that this article be passed over at town meeting, but we'll provide an update on the construction contract, which we see being requested for funding next year and likely requiring a debt exclusion for approval when it does come to the town for approval. The board has already voted to recommend passing over, and we actually put all of this information in the mailed warrant to folks, so no action is needed. Article 12, appropriating funding for a bridge and culvert study. We're recommending funding $75,000 from free cash. This would effectively evaluate the remaining culverts that we have not talked about over the course of this summer here in town. It started as a capital request that was referred to being a warrant article. It's now appearing here as a warrant article. The board had not previously taken a vote to recommend this. This is sort of a cursory level view that's necessary in order to get the ball moving to determine the condition of the culverts, and there are many in town. We've talked about some of the more high-profile ones, but there, Mr. Parisi can tell you, if it's a Demingway here, he can tell you there are any number of these that are buried under roads here in town that we need to be looking at, understanding their condition, and a very important infrastructure planning appropriation that I hope the board will consider voting to recommend.
Do you want the motion now?
If you have it.
Do
If you're willing.
Yep. Madam Chair, I move to recommend Article 13, appropriate money for bridge culvert study.
Article 12?
Excuse me, Article 12.
Second.
It's wrong.
Okay.
Yep.
You're making that correction? So I have a motion, and I have a second by Mr. Studo. Do I have discussion?
What amount, Madam Chair? What's the amount?
$75,000.
Oh, it's right there,
Yes.
okay.
Sorry.
Sorry about that, 35,000.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous?
Thank you, Madam Chair, appreciate that. Article 13, authorizing the Article 97 home rule petition for Chestnut Street Bridge. I know nearly everybody in the room is familiar with this, but for those who are not, Chestnut Street is closed at the Ipswich River crossing. The reason that construction has not begun, and the reason it's remained closed with little activity nearby is because we are still in the design and environmental permitting process. That's a process that will probably take another calendar year from now. One component of that is going to be the necessary use of a small portion of Conservation Commission property that is right at the intersection of Chestnut Street and the Ipswich River on the southwest side of the road, so sort of opposite the area where the one house is in the vicinity. They anticipate that the amount of land is going to be less than 2,500 square feet, which would likely, under the state's new open space requirements, not require designation of additional space in a different area of town. But nonetheless, state legislative approval is required, and therefore town meeting approval is required. Select Board has already voted to recommend this proposal, so no further action required. I'm certainly can answer any questions that the public might have. And I'm not seeing any online. Anyone here? Do you have anything to add?
I do that. Recently, the conservation. I'm sorry. Just recently, I brought this to the Conservation Commission's attention, had a meeting with them, and they did unanimously vote to recommend this property be declared surplus so that it can be basically transferred to the Select Board for the purposes of the Chestnut Street Bridge. And the minimum would be, or the maximum would be 2,500 square feet, but they would declare surplus.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, through you, moving on to Article 14, appropriating money to the opioid settlement special purpose stabilization fund. The town is a participant in a national multi-jurisdiction litigation that is seeking to recover funds from manufacturers and distributors of opioid drugs. We received an amount of money during the course of this last fiscal year that ended on June 30th, 2023. The State Department of Revenue has required that in order to capitalize this fund with the first amount of money, that we actually transfer it at town meeting. So we are recommending a transfer of $48,588.17 that would go into this existing fund. The balance of the funds that we received in this past fiscal year would actually be proposed for appropriation in the next article to support substance abuse efforts here in North Reading, so I'll speak to that under the next article. So the board has not yet recommended this article, but I would ask that the board consider voting to recommend this article.
It says recommended.
It's in here. It says
It
recommended.
says recommended.
Is that correct?
I'll recommend it again.
Motion to recommend. Motion to recommend Article 14.
Second?
We did recommend it.
We did recommend it.
Put it that way, at least.
Rescinded.
Motion to recommend Article 15.
That has not been recommended.
I got that motion here.
Appreciate the advanced motion. This is a request that has been offered by the community impact team, discussed at a meeting, was it last week?
Yeah.
With regard to this. It's utilizing the first bunch of funds, $25,000 of the money that was received last fiscal year to support our efforts to address substance abuse. It would be worded pretty vaguely, but the intended use is to fund a recovery coach, which is sort of the next step in the continuum of addressing substance abuse. So we'd be able to do this over the course of multiple fiscal years because it's proposed as an article rather than as the operating budget. So I think the great thing about it, and the select boards can correct me, but we're not really going to be obligated to any certain amount of it. So if it gets a lot of use, we'll have the money there. If it doesn't get used, it'll still remain there to be utilized for another valid purpose. And I just want to recognize Amy for her efforts to really understand the restrictions on the use of the money. So we believe we have a lawful plan to actually utilize the proceeds in accordance with the settlements that were there. So I just want to recognize and thank her for that. And Laura as well, who was part of the conversation with the CIT and participates. There's a lot of moving parts with these grants and a lot of components of what we're trying to do within the community. And both Amy and Laura have worked really hard to try to understand, okay, what's missing in this whole thing. So I think we in the CIT sort of tried to serve as a little bit of a clearinghouse on it, but not necessarily having the answers. So thank you.
Motion to recommend Article 15.
So we have a motion?
Here's an official motion.
I have a motion if you want.
You want to be clerk?
Please.
I'm
Right.
sorry, Mr. Wall.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I move to recommend Article 16, appropriate money for substance abuse treatment, mitigation, and/or prevention.
I think it's 15, Mr. Wallner. Article 15.
Article 15.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
you know
your
what?
articles are
It's-
off.
No,
I think we're off.
it's Article 15, but in the copy it says the other.
Right.
I'll read it again.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move to recommend Article 15, appropriate money for substance abuse treatment, mitigation, and/or prevention.
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Madam Chair, review Article 16, create and transfer funds into the secondary school building project debt service special purpose stabilization fund. So I think most folks are aware, we have proceeds from a settlement with the project manager and designer for the middle high school project of about $2.6 million. They are anticipated, those proceeds which were received last fiscal year are anticipated to be part of our certified free cash, which has been submitted as pending with the Department of Revenue. This article creates a fund that we can put those proceeds into. The exact utilization of the funds will be determined after the final project reimbursement has been received from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. The concept that I think is being discussed and that I reviewed with the financial planning team is once we pay down whatever remaining debt is out there that's on a band, whatever is left being set aside to be utilized to the benefit of the taxpayer to reduce the debt exclusion amount for the remaining years of debt on the middle high school project. We don't know what that number is going to be because we haven't received a reimbursement number yet from the MSBA. Some encouraging news, I got some correspondence from PMA over the weekend. They're getting ready to submit something to MSBA, so I think we're getting there in terms of what that's going to be. It's a significant amount of progress and a lot of paperwork that had to be reviewed. So we're certainly getting there. I think our goal and our hope is that we get to our town meeting that we get to the ban that rolls over every May and be able to not have to roll over again, sort of have it paid off. That's our goal, but all of that is going to be determined based on what the final reimbursement that comes in from MSBA is. I don't know what that number is going to be right now. So, right now the idea is take the balance of the proceeds from the settlement and just set it aside into this. And I think the board has already voted to recommend.
Okay, please.
And for those who are wondering, I think there are 11 years of debt service left in the 25-year. Sorry, I have that wrong.
2030.
Yeah, so it's more than that, 13 years.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions.
No questions, okay.
Article 17 is to cover grant deficits. There are two, $15,010 from the state 911 grant and $2,089 from the state community compact grant that the town planner has, I think, closed out over the course of the past year. So we have in the accounts, the way we roll over from one fiscal year to the other, have a deficit. We have to fund it with free cash. We did this before. It's becoming a routine for us to do, and it's a way for us to do this without having to take the hit off of free cash, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's just cleaning up very old deficits that, we've tried to collect funds, and it turns out they were unallowed costs. So we just want to clean them up once and for all. Because each year they're a hit on free cash, and so you clear them. So it's time to just clean them up.
We would not voted to recommend. Are you expecting any more, Ms. Galvin?
No.
Okay, so I think the board could vote to recommend if it's ready, even though we didn't give a motion.
You have a motion?
Yep.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move to recommend Article 17, appropriate money to cover grant deficits.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second from Mr. O'Leary. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous?
Madam Chair, through you, Article 18 would authorize the Hillview Commission to enter into golf course management contracts for terms in excess of 3 years. The business model that Hillview has utilized, which I think folks here know is unique, they don't just hand over the property to a third party to operate. They have somebody who is operating on their behalf or managing on their behalf, but the money is coming in as Hillview revenue, and we're paying that company to manage it. So we just heard earlier about how that all works. They have found over the years that contracts in excess of 3 years are to their advantage when they go to the market, at least in prior years. The most recent contract, which was a 6-year contract that's expiring at the end of this golf season effectively, was one that we went to town meeting and we sought the 3-year, we sought the ability to award a contract for more than 3 years. Town meeting granted it. This is a little different. It would give them the standing authority to do that, subject to the approval of the town administrator, and this is just based upon the fact that we've been doing this, year over year. It would prevent us from having to go back, every 6 years to seek that authorization. But I would also note it's not binding on the commission, so they don't have to go out for a contract that's more than 3 years. It's not binding on the town administrator either. If the feeling that the market sense is, hey, we should do 3 years, or we should do less, then we have the capability to do that. But if the market conditions dictate something longer, they have the ability to do that. And through you, Madam Chair, the board has previously voted to recommend the article.
And again, the Hillview Commission, again, as they're entering into the new season here, where they're going to have to go out to bid, they may very well use the previous model of 3 years, but they don't want to hamstring future commissions in their inability to go beyond that. And so therefore, Mr. Stack, Mr. Chair, is going to be standing at the town meeting. He couldn't be here this evening, but asked me to express his support for the article and express to you that he would be willing to, he intends on standing up at town meeting and suggesting that the public support this article, just to give the future commissions and the future administrators the opportunity to deal with the marketplace more readily.
Thank you.
And again, it's not binding. They can do 3, they can do 2, they can do whatever's needed.
I'm not seeing any questions, Madam Chair, so.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't bring my head up.
I don't remember voting on this, but, so it's not printed in the warrant article, but you said that the final say would be you as the town administrator?
Yes.
So you could revoke a contract if you did not think it was acceptable, or you could refuse to sign and not bind the town to a contract, in other words. Not revoke, but...
Madam Chair, through you, fortunately, the commission generally maintains a pretty open line of communication, so before they're going out for a bid for a contract, I generally have a good idea of what the terms and conditions are going to be. So what I see would likely be happening is if they came forward and said, okay, we only want to go forward for 5 years. We want to go forward for 5 years, in excess of 3, which is a law by law. The town administrator, I would imagine at that point would say, I think we're going to go out for 3 only, or something like that. That's kind of how it would happen. I don't think there would be a revocation. I don't think it would actually get to that point, to be candid with you.
No, but what I'm asking you, because this board appoints the Hillview commissioners anyway, so there's a checks and balances in place, but I'm talking about in terms of a long-term contract, because I like the idea of needing to go to town meeting to explain, we want to hire this vendor for 20 years, and let's say it doesn't work out, the commission might want to keep the vendor in place, but the town administrator might not. That's what I'm envisioning. I'm not saying they go for 20 years, but I like the oversight that the town meeting forum affords to a contract in excess of 3 years. So there's no language in this warrant article as printed that says, and the town administrator has a final say yes or no. It's in your explanation, but it's not in the warrant article. It's not clear in the warrant article that it would be ultimately the town administrator's determination whether or not to sign it. I see what you're saying, and I understand about this commission, because that's how they are and that's how they have been. They show up every year and they explain everything to us. But, maybe that's not the same, that might not be the same 10 years from now.
Madam Chair, so I'm going off of the charter provisions that put the authority for entering a new contract in the town administrator. There's a special act that gives some particular authority, dictates the terms for the commissioners, but the ability to enter into an agreement, while I listen very closely to their recommendation, ultimately falls to the town administrator, per the charter.
Thank you.
That was the exact point I was going to make, is that the ultimate authority under the charter lies with the town administrator, not with any board, committee, commission, even ourselves.
Okay.
Vested with that position.
And that could be explained further on the floor of town meeting.
So the checks and balances are in place, and the ultimate authority for signing all contracts for the town lies with the town administrator.
And Madam Chair, through you, not to prolong the discussion, but there's also, as you know, Ms. Mantelli, there are provisions too that each contract needs to be funded at town meeting annually. We only fund 1 year at a time. If a contract is not funded, leads to provisions for change to happen if need be as well. We obviously don't want to be in the business of entering into contracts and not funding them, but that's an oversight that town meeting has with regard to the collective bargaining agreements, employment agreements, and contracts. So, but then I'm getting into the weeds now.
Yeah, because this one gets paid out of the revenues that come through, so.
But it's still subject to appropriation at town meeting.
Enterprise.
But it's still subject to appropriation every year at town meeting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good, okay, thank you.
And for 35 years, they've been doing a terrific job for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's needed to be longer than 3 years. So.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the further details.
We're still okay on Zoom? No?
Well, I can see that too, yes.
Okay, all right. So we're going to move on to Article 19.
Madam Chair, through you, oh boy, that's come up very well. There was a version where that was a separate slide. Through you, Article 19 is authorizing the conveyance of town-owned land for affordable housing. I can give an introduction, but if you'd like to, Danielle, feel free to. Okay, just so the brief background for those who may not know is this article is coming back to the select board at the town meeting after having some initial discussion, I think 2 years ago at this point at town meeting, where the Planning Commission had identified 3 locations that were zoned for the affordable housing overlay, town-owned land that they were seeking to move forward with conveying to for development for affordable housing purposes.
We went to town meeting, the select board said, you know, we like the idea, but we want to know more about the properties. We'd like to see a wetland delineation occur. We went and sought funding for that wetland delineation. Was it June this year or October last year? So we had an appropriation to go out and do a survey and determine where the wetlands are on the properties to give, I think honestly the board, the neighbors around, a better idea of what might be developable, what might not be, so we know the impact. To their credit, wanting to get something going, the Community Planning Commission decided that they would pick one of those locations, 7 St. Teresa Street, as a starting point. They engaged services of a surveyor to go out there and conduct a wetland delineation. I'm not sure whether that has come back yet or not, but I know it was due back this summer. And so now I think they were comfortable coming forward with a particular property, 7 St. Teresa Street, to pursue, to basically solicit proposals for affordable housing development in accordance with the bylaw. So that's a quick introduction, but I'll defer further to the town planner. To you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Please.
Sure. So we have our wetlands flagged. We do have a survey plan of this property that we have. I can show it if you're interested in seeing it, although I can explain too that there is a large area in the front against the street. Oh, sure, I can show you the survey plan. If it's okay for me to share the screen.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm realizing amongst all the maps we showed, the one you asked for is not on there. It shows the wetlands. Sorry about that. All right.
So this is our survey plan.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can we just share that?
Oh, is it not shared? I'm sorry, I got confused because it's up on the screen.
That's a huge lot.
Click on the one on the right there. Yep. And then share screen.
In this
Right,
one?
the green one.
Oh, share screen, yeah.
And then you should.
Okay, thanks. So this isn't really all that different from, I think, what we expected on the very basic GIS maps that we had, but it's nice to know exactly where wetlands are on this property. There's a pretty large wetland area back here, and that goes downhill and extends toward, the town hall area. But on this particular property, this is the area where the actual wetlands are. The surveyor has shown our 12-foot no disturb zone where nothing could be built, and then the area, the buffer zone, up to 100 feet where there could potentially be building if the Conservation Commission were to allow it. There's also this area of upland up here. The building setback is shown, although in this zoning district, because of the overlay, we have more flexibility with setbacks. It's not quite as strict as regular Residence A. So the building setback is actually a little bit more generous here. So I think that, we wouldn't necessarily,
Madam Chair, can you zoom out a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Point out the orientation of the parcel.
I can zoom out. This doesn't give much of a locus, but
So the parcel to the right in the image, though, is on Main Street. Right, so that
I'm sorry, I'm trying to zoom out.
works.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
That's Hearthworks.
Oh, here we go.
And then behind it actually goes, it's like an apartment building, but it goes all the way over to this, almost the Subaru property. If you can see, there's a piece of town-owned land that we were talking about, and allowing Subaru to use the drain and use the easement and all the rest. So it butts that, which is where there's wetlands, obviously.
Yeah, I
What a
mean, just
surprise.
to clarify, when you see, I know for myself, St. Teresa Street, you just assumed it was over by St. Teresa's.
St. Teresa's used to be there.
Right, so,
St. Teresa Street.
yeah.
That's why
No, it's
When I
actually
was
over
baptized, St. Teresa's was there.
off of 28. Yeah, if you could clarify that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So it's actually when you head down St. Teresa Street, right up here, we're just a couple blocks over. It's, I'm trying to think of the best landmark. There's an apartment building on the corner of it, which is actually right here. I don't know if you can see my marker. There's I don't know how many units, maybe 25 units in that building, and then behind it is the property that the town owns, and it's just.
And Hearthworks is there on the corner.
I'm sorry?
The old,
Hearthworks, yeah.
the old Knights of Columbus,
Oh, yeah.
which was sold to Hearthworks, is right on the corner. St. Teresa
Yes.
Street and Main Street. Next to that is like a Abbott Shoe.
Abbott's.
Abbott Shoe in the,
Correct.
in the apartment building. So
Yeah.
this lot is behind those parcels.
So I would say that we wouldn't necessarily take a plan like this and say that we know exactly how development would proceed just because we know where the wetlands are. I think we would still want a process where we would prepare an RFP that had a lot of controls in it, and then the select board could, if you chose, authorize us to put out that RFP to choose someone as the developer, and we could put in any provisions that we felt were appropriate. For example, just pertaining to how the lot and the drainage perform, we could, guarantee that the town would pay our own engineers to ensure that drainage was designed properly and that, in such a way as to prevent any runoff onto neighboring properties. This is such a small possible development that it wouldn't trigger the stormwater bylaws, so it's not an acre of disturbance. So we could still put in our own controls, just keep things just so that it would reassure neighbors, reassure anyone who wasn't a butter. There aren't many abutters, but there are a few. There are some people who live behind here that do have some wetland areas in the back of their property. The water, the ground goes down and then it goes back up again. So looking at this, I don't see this as anything alarming in terms of where the wetlands are. It's not an uncommon kind of setup for a lot, and to have this upland area down here, I think it gives us plenty to work with. But we would still make sure there were lots of provisions in place to ensure that any RFP would require the town to work closely with our own engineer to be sure that there were no negative impacts as far as drainage.
Tanya, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about like a single home, or?
I think the most that we would want on this property, and I think the most that could go on this property, would be either a duplex or 2 single-family homes, but I really think it's best suited to 1 single-family home. And I think that that's part of the process of actually engaging with an engineer and figuring out what would be a suitable development, and also with a potential developer who may look at this and just say 1 house, and that's what would be appropriate for this. It would be no more than 2 units. And I think that's something that we had discussed with the neighborhood already when the first time this came around, that the bylaw does allow for more, but that's not what would be recommended. It's not what the CPC is pursuing. And we could put that in the RFP as well, that it could be limited to 1 house, it could be limited to 2.
If I remember correctly, was it originally Habitat for Humanity was?
They were the original developer to inquire about it. I think that their model would be what I would recommend, and I think what the CPC would recommend as far as the way to dispose of the property and to see it developed. We would have to put it out for an RFP. There would be no other way to dispose of this property. We would be required to do that. I think we would want an RFP to be built so that it provides for their model or a similar model, because their model really does allow for the community to work with them, and as far as being clear about what the community wants to see, there being volunteer and community labor that goes into the actual construction of the home. That was something that I think appealed to the CPC as far as when this was first discussed, but it would not have to be Habitat for Humanity. It would have to be an open RFP that and the RFP would be worded in such a way that we would want it to be suitable for could be Habitat, but it could be another type of nonprofit developer.
One more, and then I'll ask my colleagues. Have we thought about tunnels to towers or something like that for a disabled veteran? That's just a thought that I would have.
No, but that's certainly something that could be pursued. The way the warrant article is written and the way that the zoning bylaw is written, it does not give any type of restriction to how the select board wants to dispose of it, as long as the proper procurement procedures are followed, whether it's a sale, whether it's a donation, what organization you would want to choose and prioritize. Okay. It does not have to be any one in particular.
Okay. Mrs. Minnicone?
What is the current lot size for a single family and for a duplex?
So for Residence A, which is the underlying zoning, the required lot size would be 40,000 square feet. Under the bylaw for affordable housing, it is quite a bit smaller. I might have to look it up to get back to you. I think it's half of, I think it's 20,000 square feet for one, for a single family house, or I think the bylaw does allow you to build a bit more in it because it can be higher in density, but the minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet.
So the max that you could put on here would be, well, actually, you would have to wait to see what the response would be, right?
Meaning from an RFP?
Yes.
I think so, but I think if we wanted to impose our own density control on it and say we were willing to put out this property for redevelopment, but we want it limited to one house, or we want it limited to one duplex of 2 units, that would be at the town's discretion to do that.
I was just saying because you could actually divide it or keep a portion in the town's, the town's possession if it really didn't need the whole. I mean, to divest of this, I could only see the purpose being a permanent deed restriction as affordable housing based on this, the HUD standards, and that if the person that developed it was going to divest of it, we have the right of first refusal or some type of option in there to bring it back to our, ownership. But it looks like it's fairly large size that we could even keep some of it because we own the land behind it, or not behind it, but to the northerly border of it on this map.
Definitely, that could be an option.
Thank you.
Mr. Studo, any questions or comments? Mr. Wallner?
Good.
Mr. O'Leary?
I'm glad it's finally coming to fruition. And again, there was a little tug of war, little bones of contention here when it first came up and the planning commission put forward. But, I think this is indicative of us working together, first of all, and also knowing what we have and what the limitations on each one of these parcels are going to be. Gives us a lot more information and a lot more opportunity to either maximize the use of it or minimize depending upon what we want to do. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I'm glad you're bringing it forward and applaud the planning commission and the planner for all the effort that's been put into it. And look forward to seeing the other 2 parcels and maybe some more coming forward. So, but no,
yes,
it's great.
Do we have a motion?
We do. Madam Chair, I move to recommend Article 19, authorize conveyance of town-owned land for affordable housing at 7 St. Teresa Street.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, and I have a second from Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Of course, if we had sewer out there, we could do a little bit more with it.
I should maybe bring up that last time one of the issues had been that it was being considered for a facility for sewer, but the engineers have told us that that's off the table.
No, I know.
So.
When we first were looking
You
at
might
this
not want to
parcel,
discuss that,
I said
Mr.
we need to
O'Leary.
hold on to this to see if, we need it for a pumping station, something like that. We didn't.
Mr. O'Leary, you might not want to discuss that.
Oh, that's a good point.
No, so, but we did look at it.
I'm just trying to protect
Can't
you.
talk about sewer.
I'm not talking about sewer, I'm talking about pumping station. But anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. And as a private resident, I think it was important for the board to take a look
As a
at that.
private
And we did,
resident.
and we did, and our consultants
Yes.
told us otherwise, which was great, which made it available.
Thank you.
It's a good one.
Thank you for looking out for my interest.
Yes. Okay, Article 20, Mr. Gilberto.
Madam Chair, through you, this was an article submitted by the Recycling Committee that would amend the Code of North Reading to regulate sustainable foodware and packaging. The article would limit the distribution and use of polystyrene food service containers and utensils by food establishments in North Reading. I know that this is something that sort of came in right near the end. I know the Recycling Committee had been working on it for some period of time, but it kind of came up right near the end of the warrant being open over the summer. I know that there's been some healthy conversation between the Recycling Committee and the Board of Health, and I believe the representative of the Recycling Committee, Mr. Greenberg, is here to provide us an update. So
I'm going to defer to him if that's okay.
Yes, please. Mr. Greenberg?
Oh, Mr. Reamer, I think you're on mute.
Can we put him up on one screen or is
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So first of all, I want to clarify that I am not asking for any money. In fact, I'm not asking you to do anything at the present time. But I do want the opportunity to explain what the bylaw is and where we stand. So very briefly, the bylaw would prohibit the sale or use of polystyrene food service containers and utensils, primarily by restaurants, but also by grocery stores. Polystyrene appears in two forms. The one that most people associate with the word is polystyrene chrome, commonly called styrofoam. But it also comes in a rigid form that is used for utensils and cups. There are two big problems with allowing the use of polystyrene takeout containers and plates and utensils. The first one is that polystyrene has a tendency to break down into styrene. Styrene is a known neurotoxin. It's also a suspected carcinogen, so it's a health risk. And it's particularly troublesome if you take polystyrene and you apply heat to it in the presence of oil. It accentuates the breakdown into this toxic styrene. Well, you know, how often do we know people get takeout food in a plastic container? They don't know what kind of plastic it is. They bring it home and they put it in the microwave to reheat it, thus exposing themselves to a known neurotoxin and a suspected carcinogen. So that's probably reason enough to ban it. The second major reason for banning it is that it's not at all recyclable. There's absolutely no market for it. Nobody wants it. Particularly the foam tends to end up in the environment broken down into these tiny little particles that can be hazardous to the health and welfare of wildlife, not to mention human beings. Nobody wants it. So it ends up going, even if you put it in your recycling bin, it ends up being taken to the incinerator in Haverhill, and the ash is then buried in the landfill. So those are the two reasons why the recycling committee considers this to be an absolute no-brainer. It's low-hanging fruit. It should not be at all controversial. That being said, John Rogers, the chair of the recycling committee, and I met with the Board of Health earlier this week for the purpose of informing them as to the substance of the bylaw and to ask for their input, because the Board of Health needs to be the enforcement agent. And it obviously doesn't make any sense that we impose the ban if the enforcement agent isn't willing to enforce it. The upshot of that meeting, it was a very good discussion. The upshot of that meeting was that the Board of Health passed unanimously a motion that they support the concept and the purpose and the intent of this proposed bylaw, but they wanted more time to study it, to have some input into the language of the proposed bylaw, and to seek input from not just the restaurants and stores in town, but from the population. So we thought it was a pretty good idea to put it off until the June town meeting. So my intention is to make a motion at the October town meeting to pass over this article. Does anybody have any questions?
Do any of my colleagues have questions or comments?
just a comment. We're not the first community to be taking this up. Many other communities have done it with our neighbors, and Reading haven't done it as well. And they, I think when it actually does come up in front of the town, there is a full slideshow that Reading has allowed us to borrow from. So I'm give them credit, but the facts are pretty clear. And it appears that, you know, for the restaurants, it's much more cost effective for them to be using cardboard or something of that nature than what they're using right now. I believe that to be the case, but, you know, Dan will find that out when he goes, you know, establishment by establishment. But it's, we're not the first to do it. Many have done it. We're kind of following in line with that, and it makes a lot of sense.
In fact, it's been passed by 48 other communities in the state of Massachusetts, and 7 statewide bans have been adopted. And Mr. Wallner is quite correct. Appended to that presentation that I made to the Board of Health, and I would be making to the Select Board to town meeting when the time is appropriate. I did talk with 8 of the restaurants in town about this, and I got one negative response. There is one restaurant in town, Apothecary Ales, that is already using biodegradable containers for these purposes. 6 of the other restaurants told me that they really didn't have much of a problem with it. Appended to that presentation is a cost sheet that compares the cost of polystyrene components to cardboard, aluminum, or polyethylene or high-density polyethylene, all of which are acceptable alternatives. And in most cases, the alternatives are actually less expensive than the polystyrene products. So it's not going to be a financial burden to the restaurants. In fact, they may save a little money. And we're only talking pennies per piece, but the alternatives are less expensive.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mrs. Minipelli, did you have a question?
Just a quick question for Mr. Greenberg, if I may, Madam Chair. In your research, you mentioned that it's when it's reheated, but what if something is, you know, coming out of a fryer later and put into the container, or, you know, sitting under a heat lamp? Does that also emit the carcinogens from the materials?
Yes.
Oh.
It's heat, and that heat accentuates the release, as does the presence of oils.
Oh, okay.
The combination doubles that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Even water that sits in your car and gets hot, that's also releasing things at the same time.
Correct. That's why you can't drink it.
Which is why I have my Berkey.
There you go. That's a safer alternative.
The filter is in here and it
Right,
filters everything
right,
out.
exactly. There is inert plastic.
I know, okay.
Anyone else? Everybody? I will make one comment. Anyone who knows me knows that I am not a fan of mandates of any kind. Although I think this is important. My motto is do not mandate, educate. You are educating us, Mr. Greenberg. And I appreciate that this won't be going to October town meeting, and it will have until June to be talked about, to be education given, so that restaurants can make their decision. But I personally will never back up a mandate. So, but thank you for educating us.
Okay. If I could just respond briefly, Madam Chair, you and I have had this conversation.
Yes, we have.
Several times over a multitude of subjects. And
yes.
We philosophically just disagree. My experience, the experience of everybody that I know of that works in this area of the economy, the marketplace, we know from experience that you're not going to be able to educate either the public or the vendors to the point where they're going to voluntarily cease using these products. It just isn't going to happen. Frankly, it's a pipe dream. It's just not the way things work. There's a reason why we have governments, and one of those reasons is to protect us from ourselves. And that's what we are trying to do.
And I philosophically disagree, but I always appreciate your opinion. So, thank you.
We just agree to disagree.
That's right, but we still like each other. All right,
Just
thank you.
again,
Yes.
just as a follow-up, again, I also attended the meeting, and as I said earlier in my report, Mr. Greenberg did a fantastic job of presenting the article, what was being presented. It was fully embraced by the Board of Health, and you will be seeing it back for the June town meeting in some iteration very similar to what you have before you. So it's all very positive, and there'll be a lot more public discussion and forum to discuss it prior to the June town meeting. But,
I am nothing if not persistent.
absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Good night.
Madam Chair, I move to recommend passing over Article 20, amend Code of North Reading to regulate sustainable foodware and packaging.
Second.
I have a motion, and I have a second from Mr. Studo. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Gilberto, Article 21.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you all.
Thank you.
we'll go to
No,
22.
no hands up over there, right?
I don't see any, no.
Oh, we did 21.
Okay, we started
Yes,
with
we
21,
skipped,
so
we
I'll go to
started
22.
with that, yeah, so Article 22.
Article 22 is a home rule petition requesting authorization for a home rule petition regarding retired police officer. As I printed in the warrant, the article would grant a certain retired police officer a pension calculated as if his membership date with the Middlesex County retirement system was January 10th, 1985, as was presented to him by the retirement system at the time of his application to retire. I know that there was a request made for additional information. I'm still waiting for more information from Middlesex County in response to that. I'll share it with the board at the evening at town meeting. And the board has previously voted to recommend this.
Yes. Any comments or questions?
I'm not seeing it.
No.
So that wraps it up.
That's correct.
Okay. So we can, if I'm not seeing any hands or any questions, so we can end.
Public comment?
I mean, we're going to end that hearing. And we'll move on to public comment. Anyone in the audience? Anyone on Zoom? Oh,
Thank you for a delightful meeting.
you're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Anyone else? Okay. We can move on to meeting minutes.
Yep. Madam Chair, I move to approve the regular session meeting minutes as written for the following
Oh.
dates: June 26, 2023, August 21, 2023.
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second from Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was it, you did both of those?
Yeah, I did both. Yeah.
Town administrators report.
Thank you. The Department of Public Works is holding a public informational meeting tomorrow night, Tuesday, September 19th, at 7:30 p.m. in regard to the signalization and reconstruction of the Haverhill Street and Chestnut Street intersection. The hybrid meeting will be held at the Flint Memorial Library Activity Room located in the basement of the library and via Zoom, and a link that I provided in the TA report, and that is available on the town website. Public is encouraged to attend to see the design. This meeting is in advance of a final proposed design being presented to the select board at a future meeting. I will note for notification, we went through the town website, issuing an email through the email notification system.
We actually hand-delivered flyers in the vicinity of the intersection to the properties that would be closest to the impacts. One thing we were not able to do was to get the notice into the North Reading transcript in time due to an oversight, so we certainly apologize for that. But it will be on a select board agenda for a future meeting, and we hope we'll be reviewing the final design at that point. Again, this project was authorized at town meeting more than a year ago, funding for both the intersection reconstruction and improvements, as well as the signal. There was a supplemental funding appropriated at this past June town meeting when it became clear we might not have enough funding to finish the project, as well as to construct a sidewalk that would connect to Heritage Way as well, which is the nearest sidewalk on the east side of the intersection. So I'd encourage folks who are interested to attend and see the proposed design. The water department, as part of its maintenance of the water distribution system, began fire hydrant flushing today, Monday, September 18th. It will continue through October 25th, and I just want to encourage folks to look at the website. They have a 10-page list showing the day that your street is scheduled to be flushed. If you want to take a look at that, it'll give you an idea of when to expect that. The flushing normally occurs Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and it's typically between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. You may experience discolored water. We've seen that happen. We've had major leaks happen, or when there is flushing that occurs. If you do experience discolored water, we recommend running an outside faucet for a period of time until the discoloration clears. Again, if you take a look at the town website, www.northreadingma.gov, you can find more information. Additional information will be provided weekly in the transcript and updated on the website. If you don't have access to the internet, you can call 978-357-5260 with any questions. Again, that full street-by-street schedule is actually on the town website, so I'd encourage folks to look at it. As the public knows, the select board voted on August 21st that a dog licensed to 103 Main Street, Unit 12, under the name Floyd, be euthanized. The owner has obtained counsel and has appealed the board's order, and a hearing on the appeal is scheduled for September 28th. To protect the public from a dog that has been deemed dangerous, the police department and I have worked with town council to seek an impoundment order for Floyd during the length of the appeal. That order was granted by the court on Thursday last week, and the town took possession of Floyd that day. Floyd is in an out-of-town kennel with access to food, water, and veterinary care, and will remain there during the course of the appeal. The police department and I will work with town council in responding to the appeal in court on the 28th. I wish to congratulate and thank Lisa Egan, the former executive director of the North Reading Chamber of Commerce, who's moved on to another opportunity. I want to thank her for her years of service. I worked pretty closely with Lisa over the years, trying to pull off the events that they've invested so much in, most recently Town Day being an example of that. I mean, I think we all know it's easy to take for granted, but they started that from nothing here, and tried to replicate a very successful event in the town of Reading. And folks such as Josh Harrington, who's a resident, has a business in town, put a lot of time into that event and pulling it off. And it's proven to be a great annual event. So, but I want to recognize Lisa for her work on that. I know she's not a resident, but certainly had quite a presence here in town. Finally, please be advised that the consortium of communities that we work with to contract for solid waste disposal has agreed to a successor agreement for disposal with Covanta. Mr. Greenberg mentioned that's where our trash is taken to. The agreement would increase the current acceptance fee from $97.34 per ton to $99.77 per ton as of July 1st, 2024, and would index the fee to the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers in Boston, published by the U.S. Department of Labor for the preceding year. So that's something that's been worked on with a handful of other communities. Notice I said that the consortium has reached an agreement. I've not signed that agreement at this point because I've asked the DPW director to engage in some direct conversation with Republic to see what other alternatives might be out there. But I do expect we're going to end up back under the terms of that agreement where we've been for a number of years. We've seen the wait times have come down for us here. Having the 5-day schedule, although as painful as it was to implement it last fall, we see less of an impact when they do have a problem because we're not trying to get the whole town's trash there in one day. So I think things have worked relatively well. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide the update. And I'm just told by Mr. Chara that that listing of streets is actually also printed by street name, so you don't have to go through each 10 of the 10 pages. So folks who want to just see, it's alphabetical by street name, look up your street, you'll know what day is scheduled to be. Have your flushing here, your hydrant flushing. So, thank you.
Could I just make a comment about the Chestnut Haverhill meeting?
Yes.
Where it didn't make the transcript, can we make sure that it's posted on the North Reading social media pages?
Sure, yes, we can.
Thank you. Mr. O'Leary?
Just in relation to Covanta, how long is the successor agreement for?
I'll double check with the DPW director, but I believe it was 5 years. I'll check that.
Mrs. Minipelli?
Can we also utilize the reverse 911 process to publish that meeting as well as the fire hydrant flushing? I don't know I know that's your voice that usually is on it.
No, I've offloaded it to the DPW. It's usually Amy now.
Oh, now it's Amy?
It's
And we-
pretty helpful, I think, when
Yeah.
we get that messaging that way, and it's just another way to reach the public in terms of if they're interested probably in both of those things.
Yeah, especially people that are not on social media.
Right.
So that's a great idea, thank you.
But we did, some of us did get an email because we were also on the list to
Oh,
be
right,
notified
yeah.
of things. So we did
Yeah,
get an
text.
email,
And a
which
call.
gave us the
Okay.
listing of all the cities and towns and the date, all the streets, and the dates associated. So I looked at mine, so I need to know when the men in white shirts.
So reverse 911 did go out for hydrant flushing already, but we'll look to do something targeted for the
For the
April
meeting.
Chestnut.
My,
Don't wash your whites.
my home number and both my work cell somehow got connected to that, my personal and Jillian. So if I'm home and that comes in,
They all go
it
up.
sounds like a call center all at once. The dog goes nuts. So just
In our household, Sue gets notified before I do. So however they divvy it up, and they put it in the proper order. So
And, on that point, if you have not signed up for that, like, it's probably a good idea to get on that.
notification.
So you get an email and you get it, or you get a text, so keep informed. All right,
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn, and I have a second from Mr. O'Leary. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.